All right, and start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to Observe Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. And we're just going to lead off with what happened because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to fit this all in, but it is going to be a little bit different this time. I'm not going to lead off with Man City, with Arsenal, with Liverpool. I'm going to actually cover the other games first, but I will do a little bit more kind of an in-depth look at the Manchester derby. That probably was the story of the weekend, probably because of what's happened with Man City. Maybe it just kind of continues the story of the year, though. There are a couple other I guess nominees for that. Not just Arne Slot and Liverpool kind of being up there still, though they did have another blip. Though I think what they did was equally as impressive, even though they still dropped points. That is a good Fuller team, and I'll get into what happened in that game. Arsenal are still there, but they continue to have kind of just weird kind of performances. They're in a little bit of a rut, essentially. And one thing I think that their fans will be happy about is at least they finally got to see a different kind of version of Gabriel Jesus than they had seen for the last 2 seasons, and maybe he can actually carry on and actually find some form. And what I'm talking about is he was a bagsman yesterday versus Crystal Palace, and they needed that. They needed that hat trick. They needed him to get going. So that'll be helpful for them. There was also what Chelsea is doing is equally impressive, and frankly, I think one of the takes that I was going to think about is I was not expecting a quote unquote Pep region, someone that I thought was going to be very possession kind of dominant possession focused to be having his side as direct as they've been. They're one of the more kind of striking sides. I didn't think he would give Cole Palmer the kind of free will that he's given him. He's also found a way to fit Enzo Fernandez in there, and he just continues to all of a sudden fly for Chelsea. And not only that, this manager has come in and he's basically given Jadon Sancho his career back by playing Mark Cucurella the way he is. No longer is Mark Cucurella just being asked to kind of be a third center back. Now maybe there is in some games, but now we saw it the second half for Spurs, and we really saw it for Brentford, where Cucurella is making overlap and underlap runs, basically just giving running support for Jadon Sancho to just kind of work with. Uh, it is causing a lot of teams fits trying to deal with this Chelsea attack. All of a sudden, Nicholas Jackson is just a handful in the box as well, and they were up against a pretty strong Brentford side. Now Brentford away from home hasn't been the same kind of side, uh, but it was still they set up in a back five, similar to what Arsenal had to face with Everton. It's not easy to find spaces in those kind of games, and Chelsea had something like 16 shots. Maybe Flecken had to make something like 5 or 6 saves in the first 20 minutes. There were a lot of crosses, but the crosses had intent. They had purpose, and there was something behind it. It wasn't just hoofing the ball to just kind of hoof it. When they were crossing the ball in, uh, you know the the uh, the difference in the style of crossing as well. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't just aimless hoofing. There was purpose behind it. They were getting Levy Colwell into some pretty good areas and floating balls in. They were getting the balls out wide and doing cutback crosses. Crossing it low, crossing it early. So there was a lot of interesting things to that game. But that said, the second half was a little bit different, and Brentford did get a goal back, and Robert Sanchez had to make a pretty big save on Norgard, and so they need a game. Even though Chelsea dominated, it easily could have been a 2-2 kind of game as well. And then the other game that I'll probably end with will be the team that makes up the top four right now is not who probably what you would have expected, and it is Nottingham Forest, and Nottingham Forest getting it over Aston Villa, and you know I I would probably argue, just like a homerish thing that what Slot has done, coming into the league would be kind of the really the story of the year. Following Klopp and not necessarily having that rut, at least so far. The real answer probably is Notting well, after, Pep's collapse as well, is Nottingham Forest. Now we have to remember, this is a team, yeah, that have spent a little bit, but when you look at the course of the whole, uh, of the league entirely, it's probably, in a mid-table, as far as where they spent a lot. Now they spent a lot for a team that had just been promoted recently, but they did it just kind of, they ended up staying up by the skin of their teeth. The first couple of years they were in the league, it looks like they were gonna go down again. They were the last team that stayed up last season, and it's not necessarily, Leicester City vibes where they were just able to, be from, being from, relegated again to all of a sudden winning the league. But given where, the competitiveness of the league right now, it's just as impressive. Now, we're only kind of halfway. We're only, there, only around Christmas, but I don't think anyone would have been able to predict this. So, they're worth, giving their flowers. But I will get started with the 2 coaches that have since gotten sacked. And so I think one was probably deserved, and the other one was maybe hard done by. And I will kind of make a little bit of an excuse for Gary O'Neill, though, as the days have gone on, it's getting harder and harder, because the results argued it probably was the right decision. Key players on his team, Mario Lemina last week versus West Ham lost his head. I think he was suspended here. Apparently, he lost his captaincy, going into this game. Mateus Cunha got sent off, losing his head afterwards in this game. Ait Nori got a second yellow after the whistle had blown, so he's going to be suspended for their next game as well. And so you're just kind of seeing it. You're losing the players a little bit. You lost the faith there. Feels like you lost faith in the board, but I think the board let him down. And so we'll get started with the Wolves game. Wolves end with 1, Ipswich 2. Very poor goal to concede for the first for the first one for Wolves, but this kind of just says it all where the problems are. This comes from a throw in, and basically Delap is able to get on the ball, carry it all the way upfield, gets into the box. He has a cross into the box. It finds someone. That shot's blocked, but Wolves can't clear it, and then it falls basically to an Ipswich player. I think it's Chaplin, who has the strike. It feels like it's going to be relatively central for the keeper, but it basically ricochets off a Wolves player to go in. It might be Semedo, but Semedo isn't really a center back, and that kind of gets to what I'm talking about. Gary Neal is trying to play a back three to offer some kind of protection, because before, they were shipping goals left and right, as well. He went to a different kind of system that really worked for them last season, but he doesn't have center backs to do it now. We saw Ugo Bueno and Tati Gomez tried, and Tati Gomez, I think, is the one that actually got dog walked a little bit by Delap earlier in that play. So that wasn't good by him. And no Craig Dawson, and they don't have anyone else. You're playing a back three, and you don't even have 3 center backs. You don't even really have 2 reliable center backs here, and I think that's hurting them. Also, who are you looking to ask to play defensively here? We've seen him ask Mario Lemina in a game or two. That actually wasn't terrible, but they didn't have necessarily Lemina available here. I mean, Semedo is kind of an attack minded fullback or wingbacks. Likewise with Adenori, he's asked Adenori to play in defense. I think that was the game that they shipped 3 PKs to Bournemouth a couple of weeks ago. So it's just, this team is running on fumes, and you can bring in a different manager, and without Mateus Cunha being a hero act, and you get another goal from him in this game to make it 1-1. They actually were the better side, I thought, in the second half. But I don't know if it's just it was just players that weren't necessarily listening to to the instruction. I think they have a massive personnel problem. Now maybe you get someone in with different defensive ideas. Maybe they can stop shipping in goals, left and right. But they're in problem, and all of a sudden, getting rid of Gary O'Neill. I understand the results weren't necessarily there for you. Apparently, Wolves were the one of the more kind of overachieving, overperforming as far as expected points from last season went. So this was maybe a little bit, kind of predictable in that respect. They also, they started the season and they sold Kilman, they sold Pedro Neto. So I don't necessarily know how much I really do buy that. That said, it's not necessarily like he helped himself either. Some of the outbursts and some of the ways that he was responding to questions and interviews over the last 2 games. He was starting to blame it on the players, or he wasn't necessarily, taking it on himself. He was trying to kind of separate himself a little bit. So maybe that kind of rubbed people the wrong way as well. But there we go. Wolves are now, without a coach, and so is Southampton with Russell Morton. And this one felt it was always going to happen. But I think the funny thing about this, because they get destroyed by Tottenham, 5-0. It was 5-0 at halftime. And the thing that people have been going about is how they've been kind of playing, too loose at the back with players that really aren't good enough to necessarily do that. They don't get hard done by in any of the goals they conceded here by playing it from the back. They just could not, basically mark runners in the box to save their lives. And Spurs, were halfway to 10 right at halftime. And back, in fact, the manager left right before halftime, and they conceded a fifth to Madison. Uh, I watched the Spurs team, yesterday playing Liverpool in the cup game, and there were a couple players that came on that Russell Martin wasn't really playing that often. Paul Onuachu, who actually played in the league game for versus Liverpool before he was injured. Maybe he's just been injured the whole time. That's why we haven't seen him. But this is a guy that is 6. He looks a giant. Maybe he's 6'6", but he looks like he's 6'9". And he has, pretty good, touch, to him as well, and then you paired him with Sulemana, and then you brought in, Sugawara, to play as a wing back, and all of a sudden, they weren't necessarily playing these, like, pretty passes, these 600 passes before any kind of, aggressive action was happening. They were going long and direct, and they were causing Liverpool problems. Now, it was their U23 team for the most part, but they gave Liverpool a scare yesterday, so maybe, it's just an interim guy. They've said he's not even gonna be at all, interested in, giving him a trial run. I understand that because you only have one shot really to kind of stay in the league here. They're only, I think, 9 points away, from safety, so that doesn't feel that out of reach, but the way things are going, it feels like it's going to be worse. And just the way they were defensively, I don't necessarily know how you can necessarily fix that either. Ramsdale's been injured. They've been playing with a third choice keeper in some of these, and for the most part, they actually weren't terrible. The last couple of games, they weren't terrible versus Villa. You came into this, and all of a sudden, just everyone forgot how to play. It was rough. So I mean, the goals from Madison, Son, Sarr, a pretty good individual goal. He gets the ball from across. And then he basically, does the nice little clever dribble into the box to avoid a couple people with a nice little finish, and then Madison as well, just able to just have some fun on the byline, and then just is able to score from the tight angle. Your Spurs did look good. Now Southampton, allowed for that, but Madison with his 10 roll, Kulusevski out wide, some things I had been hinting out as things I would have liked to see. Then we see something different with the fullbacks. I've been wondering, could you try to play Pedro Porro differently? And instead, just Pedro Porro didn't play. It was, or at least didn't come on till later. It was we saw Jed Spence, a rare sighting with him. And the thing to kind of say about this is, I don't get why we haven't seen more of him because he was very very good. Now again, you factor in who the competition was, but they get the goal basically from him getting the ball on a turn. It's a brilliant little turn. And then he has a little carry with it, and then he has the vision to play in Madison. Madison makes the run ahead. It's a great little flick by Madison, and just the level, the kind of type of goals that they were scoring. It was clever. It was clever done. It was getting the ball, there was a little kind of build up here. Madison was actually the heart of a lot of this. Actually, it wasn't always further ahead. He was dropping in a little bit. We also saw a different kind of midfield here. It wasn't just Sar and Basuma. Basuma might have been actually suspended because of what happened with the red card versus Chelsea. But we saw Bergvall, given a chance to kind of shine a little bit. We saw Archie Gray at center back, so it was a little bit different. Now again, Southampton did try to kind of press a little bit, and Spurs were just playing through it. So, and then we get to what the game that I just watched with the Carabao Cup game versus Man United, and it was so crazy because I thought about doing this right around halftime, or basically after it was 3-0, because they get the first game with Solanke, and it's a poor keeping by the backup keeper of Man United, but it's a very good putback. It's a very good finish by Dominic Solanke, and all of a sudden you're starting to see him maybe grow into find the confidence that made him a 20-goal scorer for Bournemouth last season. That definitely would be something that Spurs fans will be excited about. But and then you get Kulusevski right after halftime. Man United were not terrible, but at the same time, they just hadn't offered really anything going forward. A couple chances, a couple crosses into the box that Christian Eriksen got on the end of. Rasmus Højlund wasn't really able to be that effective. There was no Amad Diallo at least starting the game. He later came on and was influential. Uh, but you saw, I thought you saw the limits a little bit to this Amorim kind of system, and Spurs just were not threatened by it. They were creating chances after chances. Kulusevski, it was deserving that he basically got the goal, the second goal, because he really was just having fun and dominating. And then Solanke, again, just great hold up play to get the ball in the box, and then has a little kind of dribble. He's looking for a kind of a space to find his shot, and he's able to beat the backup keeper from Man United. Again, this was probably the best goal of the three, and Kulusevski's goal happened where you're able to get, I think it's Jet Spence. He's able to get on the byline. It's a very good cutback cross into the box. These are things that we did not see Man City able to do versus the same, basically kind of defensive setup, not necessarily the same players. No Harry Maguire, no Mateus de Ligt. Lenny Euro played. I think it was Lindelof that started the game, and then he ended up having to go off. So Johnny Evans came on, and that didn't necessarily help things either. It's 3-0. You figure, well, only a mega collapse could basically get Man United back into it, and lo and behold, that's exactly what we get. Fraser Foster has been. You almost feel a little bit bad for him because he's been a pretty good keeper for Tottenham in the last couple of weeks. Now he's come in to take the starter role because they've lost Vicario to I think some kind of like bad ankle or leg injury. I think they've even had surgery, so he's going to be out for. I think they said January or February at the earliest. They might have to think about maybe bringing someone in January because Foster had been good to this point, and he just lost his head. Now, I I don't necessarily know if it was just a situation where just everyone just got maybe complacent. They just thought the game was kind of killed. I mean, Spurs just started taking way too many risks when they were passing the ball from the back. And the funny thing about it was, I was watching the coverage, and one of the reporters brought that up when Spurs still had the 1-0. It was only a 1-0 lead at that point. He was saying that Man United hadn't necessarily created anything offensively, but they had been doing a decent enough job to kind of press Tottenham when they were trying to pass from the back into some mistakes, and they had just been they'd gotten away with it at that point, and just the warning wasn't heeded, and Foster just basically passed the ball right to Bruno Fernandes, just right into the box, and Bruno then is able to just kind of do a square pass for Xerxes. Xerxes had sent to come on for Rasmus Højlund, and then the real one was Foster just taking way too long on the ball, and allows Amad Diallo, who had since come on, to just basically lunge and block a him trying to clear it, and clears it basically into his own net. And you look, and it's 3-2 all of a sudden with like 16 minutes to go in the game. And then Man United really started to actually wake up a little bit. Amad Diallo came on and was a firecracker essentially, and Spurs had to defend a couple blocks. There was a shot that was hit right at Foster that he used an interesting way to kind of clear it. He used his feet, and it was making the announcers really nervous. And then out of nowhere, we get the comedy to continue on the Man United's side. The backup keeper had already not necessarily had his best go of it, and then we get basically towards, it was like 5 minutes to go into the game, but still it was only a 1-goal game. Spurs were finally able to get upfield, finally able to get a corner kick, and Son basically scores from the corner kick. It's well hit ball by Son, and Bergvall basically jumps into the keeper, and the commentator afterwards said that this should have been a foul. This shouldn't have counted. I think the keeper just is kind of putting off a little bit, but I don't necessarily know how much contact really draws it. I just think the keeper just whiffs and is surprised by the delivery, surprised by the curve, and at that point, Tottenham finally have their two-goal lead again, two-goal cushion. You should be able to see it out, and then Man United go upfield, and they also get a corner kick, and they also score on that corner kick, and it was it was not the kind of type of game that I was expected to talk about, but at the same time, Spurs right now have their backup keeper, have backup defenders. Archie Gray is playing in center back. He didn't do terrible, at least in the first half, but just everyone. It was Archie Gray, it was Basuma. Everyone just lost their head in the second half. Once the second goal or the first goal went in, or the second goal went in, just everyone just seemed to get really nervous. And it was the first time that I'd seen just the entire stadium just kind of go from just being, super, at ease to just being incredibly tense. It was almost like they were just they just saw that Man United was going to come back. It was really wild to see. I finally found out what Spursy actually means, or there were a couple of jokes online, but it was incredible, and just but what's crazy is they deserved, to go ahead because of how good they were in the first half, and I think it was a Man United team that, or it wasn't necessarily, the same back line, but it was, the same kind of setup. This is a team that just they looked a shell of themselves from what we just saw last Sunday, but Spurs were doing things that City were not, doing, and that kinda complicated, some things for Man United, actual pace in the attack. It wasn't just Holland that they had to work with. They had to deal with Son. They had to deal with Jad Spence. They had to deal with Kulishevsky. They had to deal with Pedro Porro making some runs into the box. They had to deal with Solanke, and it was just it was an entirely different kind of attack. Spurs are very good at getting the ball towards the byline, getting crosses from wide areas, but also cutbacks into the box. It was just nothing something that we saw City do. Spurs were doing a better job of trying to press Man United into some errors as well, and so I was just not expecting necessarily talk about that kind of game. I mean, Man United were somewhat competitive before the disaster, but at the same time, well, outside the Ericsson moments, they really did struggle. You saw what they were missing without Amad Diallo. I think it was Anthony got his start, and he was basically hooked at halftime, which doesn't really sell confidence. Mazurai had a bit of a mess up. I thought Lisandro Martinez couldn't handle the 1v1s with Kulishevsky. But then again, Amad Diallo came on and offered another spark again. And so Tottenham survive, and who knows what would have happened if they hadn't with Ange Postecoglou. But they do survive. They're in a semifinal. They're still alive in a cup. And who knows what can happen? They're playing a lot of backups here that you figure they'll probably be able to field a bit of a more senior back line at least in that semifinal, in the two leg semifinal. But we'll have to see. Up next is Liverpool, so we'll see what they have up next for Liverpool. Solanke was a Liverpool player at one point for Klopp, and it never really worked out. There was never able to get game time over Firmino, and then he left to Bournemouth, and it's pretty cool to actually see him, rise to the ranks and be the player that he was at Bournemouth, and he was able to get his big club move. So we'll see if he has something in store for the Liverpool fans. Hopefully they don't. Son usually does. Son he's one of those attackers that always terrifies me, but looking at that back line, and Foster feels like he could be a little bit vulnerable as well. So we'll see what that game stores for us on the weekend. Some other results: Newcastle also had a pretty big day for them. First game where Van Nistelrooy of Leicester got kind of a bit of a wake up call, where his side is no Samori, no Ndidi, so that maybe explained a little of it. No real midfield protection at all, and the back line was absolute horror show. It was 4-0 by the 60th minute mark. It could have been more. Goals from Murphy coming off a corner kick, and then Bruno Guimaraes, maybe lucky not to have been sent off at this point, because he dove and then committed a pretty bad foul before there was a free kick, and then Bruno was able to get on the end of the free kick. And then Ishak right after halftime, makes it 3-0. And then Murphy, after Ishak basically supplied Murphy after leading a counter. This was And basically it was 4-0. It could have happened a little bit earlier. Ishak and Murphy missed some easier chances as well. Newcastle, before you're trashing Leicester, did feel re-energized. Gordon back on the left seems to suit them a lot better. Lewis Hall, I think, offers pretty good support with Anthony Gordon. And Murphy on the right. I've talked about that a couple of times too. Sometimes Eddie Howe has struggled between Anthony Gordon and Harvey Barnes. How do you fit them both at the same time? He's been, basically using either Gordon or Barnes on the right side, and neither really seemed to be that comfortable with it. Gordon was able to apply a pretty nice assist for Arsenal, but for the most part, it feels Gordon likes playing either through the middle or basically on the left, and he has a little. He seems like he has a pretty good combination with Lewis Hall and just Murphy, if nothing else, he has a right foot and he likes just being on the right when he receives the ball. Uh, and, uh, and I don't know, it feels like it balances them out a little bit. Also, the midfield is quite good when they're not when they're not fully trained with Tonali. Tonali, I think, just got 2 goals for Brentford to help Newcastle advance in the cup game. That's a Brentford team that Newcastle just lost to in the league. And then Joe Linton and Bruno kind of next to him. That to me is probably the best midfield that they have. No Longstaff, no Joe Willock or any of those I guess squad players. The it just feels like they move the ball a little bit better. It just feels like it's a more kind of a there's just they're just a little bit better on the ball, better in duels, just better. It seems, but Leicester are also a pretty good team when you're trying something a little bit different because their center backs are Vestergaard and Connor Cody, who cannot run. Christensen, one of the fullbacks, did not know when to mark his man. He kept leaving, to run to Ishak, leaving Jacob Murphy open for a couple of these goals. There's a lot of work for Van Nistelrooy to keep this team up. We'll just kind of say it there. They were able to have a pretty good comeback win versus Brighton just a week ago, and here was a bit of a reality check. And I think I saw another stat. They conceded almost 30 shots here. It could have been a lot more because Newcastle kind of laid off the gas after they got the fourth. They conceded like 31 shots to West Ham. And that was the game that they won 3-1. But they conceded a lot of shots in that game as well. So that could be something to see. I mean, their goalkeeper's pretty good, Hermanson. He was able to keep it from being really, really ugly because it really, really could have been. And then we have a big day for Crystal Palace, beating Brighton 3-1 with goals from Chalobah, Sarr, then Sarr again, and then Ferguson made it a little bit respectable at the end, though not really. This was a bit of a bizarre game because Brighton did have pretty good chances in the first half, at least I thought. But there were 2 lapses, and all of a sudden you look, it's 2-0 at halftime. It didn't really feel like João Pedro and Jorginho Rutter were on the same page attack-wise, so that was hurting him. And then we see Fabian Hortzler make a bit of a gamble. So he takes off at halftime. He takes off Tariq Lamptey for Enciso, and that is not a player that you would imagine is like for like. That's you have a creative kind of attacking midfielder versus basically either a not necessarily a wide player, but a fullback or a wing back. And we basically see it's a Stupian, and I think it's meant to use this kind of wing backs, and it livened up their attack. I mean, Dean Henderson, the goalkeeper, had to make a number of pretty big saves just to keep this a clean sheet. It did feel like Brighton's had something 11 shots or something in that second half. It did feel like they had retaken the momentum. Yeah, I think it was 50-50 possession in the first half, and then Brighton, had way more of the ball. Palace are defending a 2-goal lead, so you allow them to kind of set back a little bit. So that explained a little bit of it, but also, Palace, it was setting up kind of perfectly for Crystal Palace. Soak in some pressure, maybe allow Brighton to come into you a little bit because at the end of the day, Brighton have to chase the game because it's not just 1 goal. You're down 2 goals, and Brighton were trying to press really high, and you have Lewis Dunk back there, and unfortunately, Crystal Palace exploited that with Sarr. Someone with the pace of Sarr, you understand it. There was a couple times when Mateta nearly got in as well, and you just figured it was only a matter of time before that was going to show up, and it did. But even before that, Munoz for Brighton, for Crystal Palace, had scored the 3rd goal with a tap in after Sarr had also made a made Brighton commit an error. This one was a Estupiñán kind of misplaying a ball that he allowed to bounce. But that so that one didn't necessarily count, and then Sarr was able to get in behind and was able to convert the 1v1 chance past past the goalkeeper. Then they had a chance to add a second or a fourth goal that Nketiah was through on goal, chance to make it four. And unlike Sarr, his chip kind of missed it wide, and then Ferguson basically made it a little bit respectable at the end. I think the Palace thought I had was you look at the defensive kind of setup, or at least the personnel that they have. And they have Maxence Lacroix, you have Chalba, you have Mark Gahey, and you look at that, and you have 3 players that they can they can be comfortable receiving the ball, but for the most part, they are all very, very good at recovering and covering a lot of distance, and basically, they were able to play a really high line. They're also able to be really, really aggressive. They're aggressive on João Pedro, aggressive on Ruder or whoever else was playing through the middle, be able to step out on Matoma in those kind of respects. And you've got 3 players that can defend a very high in a high line. Because of that, you can press a little bit higher as a result. And on the flip side, you look at Brighton. Brighton don't have that luxury. So it's been really good recruitment to bring in someone like Lacroix in, Chalba in, and someone like Sarr. And Sarr is a player that wasn't really featuring early in the season. Also, Mateta wasn't always starting for them as well. And it feels like Crystal Palace have found a bit of a groove. Now, they just lost yesterday to Arsenal in the cup game. That can be, and they did play a pretty strong team, but that's probably not what they're necessarily holding the season about, especially considering how they started the season. They just it would have been nice for them to have a semifinal, chance to have that, maybe a chance to go to Wembley. But that's their aim probably is just to stay up after the start they had, and I think barring injuries, they should be okay to do that. And then with and then with Brighton, I think you're starting to be in a little bit of a rut now. You've drawn Leicester, that which looks worse and worse now. They lost to Fulham before that, and so I think they've lost 3 games in a row, dropped points in 3 games in a row, and that's 3 games that Lewis Dunk has returned. And I don't always like going at him, but it just feels like it's hard not to notice that. Fabian Hortzer also, I think, is trying his best to still trying to figure out his lineup a little bit. He has a big squad, and I think that's maybe starting to give him some headaches, because a couple of these games now we've seen Danny Welbeck that doesn't always feature, and it feels like maybe their attack looks worse off when he's not necessarily playing. I don't feel like João Pedro is a striker that leads the line. I think he works off a striker, whether or not that's with Ferguson or that's with Danny Welbeck. The partnership with Rudder and Pedro did not necessarily work out, so I don't feel like that balance worked out. Or in the midfield, when with Carlos Baliba, it feels like he's trying to find someone to play with Carlos Baliba. I don't necessarily know if it's Ayori. We've seen Wyford be tried here and there. He's been in and out. We've seen Matteo Rally in and out as well, and so it feels like they're still trying to find maybe a second kind of partnership there. In this game, it was also kind of weird. We saw one of the changes that he did. Talking how they went to wing backs, is they didn't necessarily bring on a third center back. They used Carlos Baleba to almost be kind of their makeshift kind of back three. They pushed him a little deeper in the second half, so that was interesting as well. For the most part, they were quite they gave Palace fans at least something to be fearful about before that third goal happened, and then it kind of did. So we get to other results here. We have Bournemouth continuing to play well. Maybe they're even at a stage where a draw with West Ham is maybe disappointing. 30 plus shots in the game for them, really, but they're also kind of unlucky that it wasn't they didn't maybe get a little bit something more. But at the same time, they had been blanking until Inez Unel came on and scored a worldie of a free kick to kind of level things, coming off a bit of a late PK that Paqueta scored, that made it 1-1. And that, unfortunately, that Paqueta PK came from Tyler Adams kind of just having an outstretched arm into the box towards the end. This was a very, very weird game. Both teams were allowing it to be very open, very, very stretched. West Ham had their moments going forward. It felt like they fancied Kudus and Wan-Bissaka, both playing on the left side here, going at Adam Smith. I thought that was that was happening a lot, and it felt like, they started the game with Jared Bowen through the middle. That wasn't really working out. It was like Paqueta or someone on the right, and they ended up kind of, taking Carlos Soler out. They moved Paqueta a little bit deeper or gave him, like, his 10 spot. They brought on they moved Bowen to his kind of preferred spot, and Bowen had a couple really, really scares in that second half. It just feels like he's more comfortable, playing on the right, and they brought in Nicholas Fulkrug, and so we saw Lopetegui, do some changes that we hadn't already seen, and Fulkrug nearly won them the game. There was a cross that found him, and he had a pretty good header on it. I mean, it was right at Kepa, but Kepa still had to make that save. But that said, defensively, it looked like Bournemouth could have scored anything they wanted. They just, they haven't always had their shooting bits. And one thing I am wondering is, does Iriola, does he maybe just like the vibes, like everything that he's seen so far? Or does he maybe roll the dice and try maybe Inez Unel over Evan Nielsen? It just, yeah, the other player that comes to my mind when I watch Bournemouth is Marcus Tavernier. He doesn't always get starts with him, but I feel like when he comes off the bench, he feels like they make a slightly more, it feels like they're a little bit more of a competent kind of a attack. I guess I can put it that way. But the other thing too is Bournemouth have a very strange kind of playing style because they can't control games, and so, I mentioned how it was a very open game because they get the ball and they wanna run with it, they wanna carry it, they wanna be, fast forward. It is very similar to like an earlier stage of Klopp. I think I've mentioned that before. They press high, there's a lot of intensity there, but when they get the ball, they wanna be direct. They wanna go, and it's not always necessarily with a long ball, they can do that, but sometimes they get guys, they just wanna carry it, so the passing numbers aren't always there, but when you get guys that are gonna carry it a lot, that can lead you having people kind of leaving where they would be otherwise on the field, and if you kind of if you misplay a pass or if you lose the ball in that kind of sense, there is space to counter, and so usually Bournemouth games are very, very chaotic, very wide open. It feels like, their manager likes it that way. You understand because they have attackers that really do well in open games, but it's those times when maybe a team is settled in against them, they are kind of struggling, just they're missing that final kind of piece to it, I think. But for the what Andre Iraola is doing with Bournemouth, there's no reason to poop on their parade. And then before we get to again the Chelsea's, Arsenal's, Liverpool's, and City and United, one game I do want to kind of mention is Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa, and the Watkins was for Aston Villa. Watkins was healthy, but benched. I was wondering about that after the Champions League game, and John Duran gets his first start and scores, and then he was taken off. So maybe Emery didn't necessarily get that right. This was a bit of a nothing game in the first half. There was a talking point where Elliot Anderson maybe got away with a shirt tub on Morgan Rogers. That could have been a PK. Second half though did really pick up. But the so the f- and it was a motivated Forest side. They're at home, so you understand that. But we saw a Forest side that I don't even think we've seen before. They finished with 90% passing accuracy. We don't normally see that from this team. They go down a goal, and Nuno brings on Anthony Lenga off the bench, and suddenly they looked really, really threatening every time they attacked. They were pushing numbers really, really high up. Forest are kind of a throwback team. They're not afraid of getting Nico Williams there or whoever's playing fullback for them or Ole Aina. They're not afraid of getting both really high and wide, and they're using lots of clever runs into the box, and they're not afraid of playing with width. Not afraid of also crossing it into the box. They've got a big guy that they can just lug stuff in Chris Wood, and Chris Wood doesn't necessarily score here, but he scored when it wasn't he scored, and it didn't necessarily count. And it was just kind of just a minimal offside, so it could have been even more. But right before we get to the Duran goal, it looks like Forest had gotten the first goal. There was a corner kick, and I think it's Nicholas Dominguez. He has a free header, and Emi Martinez makes an unbelievable world class save to keep this out. I mean, the ball is literally behind him, and he somehow keeps it out. But he doesn't. It's not always good because after John Duran scores, it also had an unbelievable header, and here the keeper had really no chance Forest has have some kind of a corner kick of themselves. They're able to float a ball in, and so it's a recycled corner kick. And Milenkovic scores for a second week in a row. And here there's a great whip ball ripped in by Nico Williams, but it feels like Martinez kind of made a mess of this one. He tried to catch it or kind of parried it just at the last second, basically parried it into his own net. So. He has that world class save, and then he has one of those moments, and then at the towards the end of the game, Forest were able to get the game winner, and it comes from Villa trying to play from the back and getting kind of caught. I think it's Matty Cash who gets brushed off the ball by Elliot Anderson. People thought, at least the commentator thought, could have been called for a foul, but it wasn't. And VAR didn't reverse it, and Anderson then picks out Anthony Elanga, making a run inside the box, and then he applies the finish as well. And then, like I mentioned, Wood scored and also had a goal rolled out. Nottingham Forest really woke up in the second half. They finished with almost kind of double the shots of Aston Villa. Aston Villa only had 8. A possession was 50-50, 3 big chances for Forest. And then the passing number, 300 or 431, so higher than we normally see. Normally they're in the 300s. And then 90%, 91% accuracy. So that's not something we're used to seeing. And like I said, the tactics of this team are very, very old school. But Nuno Espirito Santo is kind of an old school manager, and he's showing that this can still work. They don't always have possession, and as we saw versus Man United. But what they are do is they're very hard to break through. They can sit deep. Now we did see some teams have some success with them. We saw Arsenal recently. We saw Newcastle, but they can defend deep quite well. Their XG is one of the top 4 in the leagues anyways. The XG conceded, and now you're starting to see that with the points, and so they're not afraid to throw some crosses into to the big man for him to attack in Chris Wood. You've got real workers on the wings with 1v1 ability, but also creation with the way that the kind of crosses that Hudson Odoi has in his locker. You've got boatloads of it. You have Elanga that can come on the bench or usually start for you. Jota Silva has shown that he can give them something. Gibbs White as well. They've had some pretty decent scouting over the last 2 seasons for them. The fullback's high and wide, so it's traditional. We're not seeing this inverted stuff. We're not seeing one try at center back. We're seeing 2 very good center backs for them as well. To talk about center backs, with Milenkovic and Murillo, and they're allowed to step up and be aggressive as well. They're really good defensively out of possession, really good when they do attack. And the other thing too, I mentioned it last week, is they got players that are willing to run. They cover a lot of distance. It's easy to it's easy to outwork teams when you got willing people to do that. And they have spent a lot of money, but again, I think it's what was the number? Like 240 million or so, maybe not counting player sales. You going the other way, so it is a giant sum for a promoted side to spend, and they got hit basically for that. But again, over the context of the whole league, that probably again is I would be surprised if that's even in the top 10. So I just think the giving where they were last season, given the points deduction that they did take, given that the squad that Nuno basically inherited, where Steve Cooper had some of these players and was not playing anything like this at all. Now, it's not like Nuno is some kind of massive forward-minded manager. He calls himself pragmatic, and they are they don't necessarily play with the ball. Uh, but he's given them an identity, and he's given them when they do attack, they actually look quite good at doing that. I don't feel like Steve Cooper, their former coach, offered them that. And so, like I mentioned, you have Slot's rival, you have Enzo Maresca's Chelsea all of a sudden, pushing right there for a title as well, and then you have Pep's collapse. The story that maybe surpasses all of that is Nottingham Forest being here in Christmas in a Champions League spot above Man City, and I just don't think anyone would have expected that. Basically, and it's they just played Aston Villa. They're basically trying to copy what Aston Villa did last season. Just someone just completely coming in, completely out of nowhere, and upsetting the apple cart. And to speak of Aston Villa, uh, Unai Emery is kind of I mentioned it before. I feel like he pulling kind of some miracles just for Aston Villa to still kind of be getting the results that they've been. Yeah, they lose Leon Bailey to an injury, and he's got to play Matty Cash for his right wing, and then it moves Konza back to right back, which isn't the best way to play him. So you have to play with Carlos. You have to give him serious minutes, and offensively, sometimes just it feels like Morgan Rogers, I don't really know what he is. I know that he's a very aggressive ball carrier. I know he can be very good on transitions, but that's kind of it. John Duran to me is completely all alone. There's no support kind of near him. Now some of that it would be Matty Cash if he was able to make some runs from the fullback kind of spot. As a winger, all he's going to do is kind of cross ball. Maybe he would be kind of doing that the same. So that's maybe not the best example, but you don't really have well, he's not gonna really beat anyone, 1v1 in the box, I guess we can put it that way. I mean, so John Duran was really working on scraps. I think one of the shots he had before he scored was he tried a bicycle kick, and it was audacious as hell. It didn't miss by much, but he wasn't really given a whole lot of support, and then once he got across, sent to him by John McGinn, he got on the end of it, and what an unbelievable header that was, but I wonder, can you find a way to play Duran and Watkins together? But yeah, there's Unai Emery is the fact that he hasn't necessarily imploded with a lot of these injuries that he's facing with. He's doing a good job again, and yeah, this one didn't necessarily work out for you, but we'll see what they have in store for the weekend. And lo and behold, they welcome Man City, so we'll see who they beat last season at Aston Villa. So we'll see if they can make it basically 12 in a row to kind of give away what happened with Pep's side over on Sunday. And then so that is kind of it. We are, like I said, we're gonna do things a little bit differently. Went over the other games a little bit earlier than normal, uh, and then kind of we'll get into what happened with the Manchester derby with Liverpool again playing Fulham with 10 men. I think what they did with 10 men was very impressive. Arsenal. With their runs versus Everton, we'll get into that coming up. One thing to talk about Arsenal again is what Gabriel Jesus kind of did with his hat trick yesterday. So, but that's one thing I'm thinking about is there's some kind of rumblings now that Marcus Rashford is maybe up for sale. I don't necessarily know if Man United would give him to a rival kind of club. But his wages are apparently higher than Mo Salah, so I don't necessarily know how much demand there is for that. But he scored 30 goals a season or two ago, 2 seasons ago. Now it was in a kind of a counterattack kind of setup, but he offers some teams something that a lot of people don't have a directness, someone that when he can cut into the box and he can get a shot off. Basically, we're not seeing Arsenal necessarily being able to do that. They're struggling on that side with Martinelli and Trossard. Here, Trossard can get a shot off, but he doesn't have Marcus Rashford on a breakaway is going to be entirely different. They don't really have that ability to counter outside of just Saka being able to ask to kind of run to the ground. So I'm wondering, does Arsenal maybe look there if Man United are even open, or you look at the other way? It's one thing for Gabriel Jesus to get on the end of to get on the end of some scoring droughts. Do they look at someone like Victor Osimhen right now is logging minutes in Turkey? I completely forgot about him. This is a guy that was linked to all the top clubs just basically over the summer, and he's left Napoli and he's gone to Turkey, and I don't necessarily know if there was some kind of there's some kind of falling out or there's attitude problems. I don't really know what it would be. Now, he would also probably have high wage demands, but and maybe he wouldn't. I don't necessarily know what he is like without a possession, but Arsenal, I think if they're going to win the league or they're going to catch teams that are ahead of them, they're going to need something up front that Kai Havertz doesn't offer them. Uh, I don't necessarily know if Jesus does either. There were these, the Jesus I saw, yesterday looks quite good, but again, he basically went a whole year without scoring, so I don't know how much you can rely on that. I don't think you can rely on Havertz, and I've kind of talked about that before. Basically, when Arsenal don't have the basically set piece cheat code, they can maybe get be stopped a little bit. And then one last one to talk about is Chelsea and Brentford probably will end on this one. And the only thing I'll say about here is this was not, again, not what I was expecting with someone that was coming in to care about possession football, because I've joked about that, and it feels like he's showing himself to be way more adaptable than I would have expected. And he's found a setup that gets the most out of Jadon Sancho, Madueke, as well. Marlo Augusto, Chelsea are doing this without Reece James. Marco Augusto has come in, and he's being asked to play in different kind of ways. Uh, and he can play inverted. He can play at fullback, or he plays deeper as part of their kind of makeshift back three. He's able to get forward and apply some pretty good crosses as well. Mark Cucurella, this is a guy that you know, I, everyone has had their jokes after what happened last week with the slip, and he didn't necessarily have his best half for versus Tottenham, but Mark Cucurella has from the second half to the Spurs game, and Mark Cucurella was someone that was missing in the Liverpool game from what I remember when Chelsea played them. He offers them a little something different, and he has given Jadon Sancho just new life because now Jadon Sancho is someone to running off him to work with, and you already have Cole Palmer making runs into the box. You have Enzo all of a sudden being a little bit more advanced. You always have Jackson that's an issue as well, and Chelsea's attack really is hard to defend over the course of the entire game. They had Brentford in a back five that was pinned in, and Brentford had no way to escape. And Brentford are usually a pretty good, counter-attacking kind of team, and we did see that show up a little bit in this more in the second half. But the first half, they had no way to escape, and that really was impressive by Chelsea. But that's a again, Sanchez having to make some pretty big saves. There was one on Norgard, specifically where, and then towards the end there was a bit of a brain for it that allowed Embremo to score and make it 2-1. And then at the end, I think Cucurella tried to buy some kind of a foul to prevent a free kick and basically got himself sent off. So it's funny, I talked about Mark Cucurella, and they might not have him for their next game. But that is kind of where that is setting it up where we are, and then I will get started with the Manchester derby, and the I'm not necessarily going to talk about the details of necessarily each play, but I do want to talk about what I saw as far as changes go, because that basically tells the story. So we start with just Gvardiol, basically kind of a short corner kick. Kevin De Bruyne has a cross that's blocked or deflects in the air, and that kind of helps City because the spin makes it a little bit easier. And then Gvardiol just out jumps. I think it's Diego Dallo, but also Rasmus Højlund is kind of there, but I think he's taken by surprise. We have and then the second half. Man United actually take a little bit more control of the game. The chances hadn't come yet, and then the chances actually do start to come. So first we have Rasmus Højlund given the ball. I think it's by Lisandro Martinez. Pretty good ball in the air. Pretty good ball into the box that Ruben Diaz gets lucky that he goes to ground and tries to kind of do a tackle around. He tries to get a body basically around the tries to get a leg around Rasmus's body, and he doesn't get the ball. And it does, bring, get some pretty good contact on Rasmus Højlund, but that's not called. And then we get to the big Bruno chance. Bruno was played in. I think it's also by Rasmus Højlund, who woke up a little bit in that second half. And Bruno, threw on goal. You would have thought surely he would have put that away, and he goes for the chip and misses wide. But it doesn't matter because we get to the Man United do score, and it comes from a player that, for the most part, I actually thought had been playing a pretty good game, given how he had come on and been playing at an entirely different position all game, and that is Mateus Nunes. There's a Man City corner kick that has when on rewatched, I didn't see this live. On rewatched, you can see it on every single corner kick. This is a guy that is playing their left back, and because he's right-footed, he is basically playing on the right side of the of City's kind of field on their corner kicks, and I think it's because if the ball goes long or goes in the box, he's gonna be able to get his right foot to kind of strike on it. Uh, and it just maybe he feels the angle is better. Maybe Pep has instructed him to do that. So but basically, what happens on this is Man United or Man City aren't able to necessarily clear things away, and Man United aren't able to clear things away. Man City still have the ball, and he's not able to get around and change. And basically, what happens is the ball's kind of played to him, and he sees Ruben Diaz actually pointing, and that's kind of the problem as well. Ruben Diaz probably shouldn't have done that, He's pointing to go back to Ederson, and he does, and just Amad Diallo just sprints out and just wins the race to get it to anyone, and then it goes past Ederson. Amad Diallo has the chance for with his left foot, has the chance to try to pass something into the empty net. He opts against it, and you figured maybe the chance had gone, and then Mateus Nunez makes the second error and basically crashes right into him. And so PK, Bruno Fernandes, cool and calm and collected, converts, and then that is like the 81st minute, and then Amad Diallo in the 92nd minute, right as it looks like this probably was going to be a nothing kind of, 1-1 kind of game. It didn't feel like anyone really deserved to win this. And then Man United basically take it from Pep and Man City, where I think it's Lisandro Martinez again, and there's just no one giving any kind of pressure on him at all, and that kind of plays a role in this a little bit. Man City can't press the ball anymore. They don't really think there's going to be any kind of danger. I think it's Bernardo Silva and maybe Savia who don't really know who they're supposed to mark, and there's no one to give any kind of pressure on him. And Lisandro Martinez floats a pretty good ball into the box, and then Amad Diallo just does it all after that. He has an unbelievable first touch to collect this off the bounce to get it over Ederson, and then basically he's able to running full sprint. He's able to get his left foot on it from the tight angle, and it would have been so easy to whiff this, in my opinion, and it's quite great skill. But that said, he does kind of club it a little bit, and the ball is just only slightly kind of going in. It's awkward, but I think Vasco Gvardiol has a chance to clear this, and he tries to do kind of a nonchalant kind of back heel instead, and whiffs, and it goes in. And so that is where we are. City's crisis continues to get worse, and the funny thing is, I knew about this, but rehearing it made my mouth drop because this started, a little of this drought started before the EPL. So they lose in the cup game to Tottenham. Then they go ahead and they lose to Ruben Amorim's Porto, and then they go to Bournemouth. And apparently that Bournemouth game, going into that, they had not lost in the calendar year, which again, just hearing that was absolutely bonkers, and all of us because you think back to what it's been, since. And I think I'm going to make the case that this probably was the worst one, because of I think the Pep maybe got the lineup wrong. I think he's maybe overthinking things, but also here, you've got the 1-0 cushion, and he made maybe some changes and maybe played directly into this. But the other thing too is just he has found a way to. He's so afraid of being countered on. He's now completely neutered Man City's attack, and you've got Kevin De Bruyne out playing. You've got Phil Foden playing and Holland all at the same time now, and they can't get any kind of looks at all. In fact, Kevin De Bruyne had a really rough game. I don't know. If all of a sudden the game load is already affecting him as he's just come back from injury, but he did not look himself, and Pep actually subbed him off. But this was rough. So we'll get and the let's see, to so one thing that happened with the Juventus game, this I haven't thought about as well, is I thought it was. I basically think Pep got scared because in the Juventus week in the midweek Pep went into this thinking, we're not going to lose the ball. We're not going to take a risk. We're not going to push people forward. We're just not going to get exposed on transitions like we did in the midweek. And I think that maybe backfired a little bit because I feel like in most of these games, in the Spurs game, in versus Brighton, they were still an offensive threat. And I feel that has since died now. They weren't an offensive threat versus Liverpool, and they really weren't that big of a threat versus Juventus. There was one moment when Kevin De Bruyne was able to get in Holland and force a pretty good save by the keeper. But they controlled the game. They had like 80% of the ball, but they didn't. I think they had like 4 or 5 shots just in the first half in that Juventus game, and it just seems Man United are good defensively, at least at least better defensively, at least under the setup. But I don't think they're this good, and I think City basically majorly helped them as we just saw with what Spurs just did. So leading off with this, some things to talk about as well is Man United have started to have some success versus Man City. They beat them in the FA Cup. Now an entirely different team. But they played a pretty good 1-1 draw in the Community Shield. That was also a bit of a different game. I think Bruno Fernandes was tried as kind of a false nine with everything at worth saying as well. But then Man United came into this with not necessarily the most confidence either. So they had a weird game on Thursday. I already talked about that a little bit, and I did feel like there was intrigue coming into this, and then part of the intrigue was also who made the bench and who didn't. And that was a lot of the talk, in the warm up to this. Garnacho and Rashford were not part of the squad or even part of the bench, and you were just looking at how the game was playing out in that first half or even second, and you just thought, man, could they do with a little bit of a pace in their attack? And then all of a sudden, Garnacho or Amad Diallo finally did offer that. Uh, Rasmus did in some spurts as well, but they weren't really able to find him at least until the second half. The other kind of talking point is maybe Man United haven't necessarily. Well, Man United have had some success recently versus Pep, and as has their new manager in Ruben Amorim as well. So that was kind of a storyline, going into this as well. So we get with the starting 11 is weird. So we get Walker, Diaz, Carvalho, Nunez, and Nunez is a player that we haven't seen him play left back before. It was I saw the starting lineup and I thought, well, this is going to be relatively easy for Man City because I thought Nunez on one wing, Doku maybe on the right to kind of get to the use that pace to use that right foot to actually do some cutback balls into the box for either Holland or if not Holland, then you've got maybe Kevin De Bruyne and Foden, basically trailing into the box and it's going to be Party City there, and we didn't see that at all. We saw basically Bernardo Silva try it on one of the wings, and then we saw Doku. And I'm going to get to this later. This is where I think Pep is really screwed up in some of his lineups. He can't get any kind of directness into their attack. Bernardo Silva playing at the wing is someone that's just going to be he's going to hold with, but he's not really going to beat anyone, and he's not going to be able to advance at all. And too often you saw Erling Haaland just completely by himself with no help at all. Now Doku can offer something on the left, but it felt like Doku didn't always know what his kind of role is either. And I'm going to get into that. I think him and Nunez were kind of a bit confused a little bit on who was supposed to play inside, who was supposed to be outside, because it wasn't always one or the other. Sometimes it was kind of both kind of screwing up a little bit. Now Mateus Nunes did do a pretty good job defensively, I thought, on Amad Diallo at least 70 minutes going into this game because that was the other thing too. I think Pep was really worried about Gvardiol on Amad Diallo, and we don't see Gvardiol as left back anymore. He's basically their third center back or a different center back. Sometimes we did see him kind of shifted a little bit more into midfield, but we didn't really see him playing out wide. And we see Kyle Walker and Ruben Diaz, and Kyle Walker is definitely not the same player that we're used to seeing as well because he wasn't getting forward either. But maybe that was actually a good thing. I don't necessarily know. But then you look at what Man United went with, and the one thing I was thinking about is you've got Mason Mount on that side, on Kyle Walker's side. You've got Dallo on Kyle Walker's side. It's going to be actually this is maybe the game that Kyle Walker is gonna redeem himself essentially because you finally have players that don't necessarily have the pace necessarily to him, and all of a sudden Kyle Walker's kind of turned into their Andy Robinson. In my opinion, or I guess vice versa. Because Liverpool fans are starting to struggle with that too. But anyways, we get to the Man United lineup. We get to Ligt, Maguire, Martinez, Bruno, Ugarte, and then Mazurai, Diallo, Mount, and then I should say Amad Diallo, and then Diego Dallo for as the other kind of wing back, and then Rasmus kind of just by himself. And Mason Mount started, and he lasted about 10 minutes, so that didn't necessarily work out. Bruno, started a little bit deeper, and then he was moved up a little bit further forward after Kobe Mano came on. Maybe that actually helped them. And then the other thing to talk about was the defense. The back line was Delict, Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire getting a start instead, and this was not what we would have expected. Harry Maguire actually did a pretty good job on Holland, but for the most part, Holland made it easy on him. And by doing the back three and with having Ugarte kind of in there as well, Ugarte and Kobe Mano as well, is you had protection there, and so you had Delict able to be a little bit more aggressive, be able to basically follow Foden or follow Kevin De Bruyne, and Martinez able to kind of do the same thing. Where I don't feel like they would have been able to do that basically a season ago. So that kind of factored in a little bit something too, and we kind of see that. So uh, looking at one thing you kind of mentioned is when I saw the lineup, I really did feel like it was going to be relatively easy game for Man City, and shows what I know. So we get to the shape, and again, defensively, Mateus Nunes is a left back in possession, but he's also kind of next to Gundogan, sometimes in midfield, sometimes being a fullback, and then with Doku, and sometimes he's behind Doku, sometimes Doku's kind of wider out of him, sometimes Doku's inside, and Mateus Nunes is supposed to be further wide. I didn't really understand the role of Jeremy Doku, at least in that first half. In the second half, it was a little bit better, but uh, here you understand he's trying to get legs basically next to Gundogan any way he can. Sometimes it was like I said, Gavardiol there as well, but for the most part, it felt like Mateus Nunes was his task was basically to handle Amad Diallo, and again, for the most part, he was doing a pretty good job of doing that. Uh, but he also would be, he's been their kind of forward-minded player. He's maybe the best crosser in the entire team, and him not being allowed to go forward, I think maybe hurt them a little bit. So that could be something as well. He's also he's a good ball carrier for them essentially. But we don't you don't really want your left back to necessarily do that. So I thought he was a little bit limited in what he was allowed to do. He was getting into some spots though, and I thought there would be maybe moments where Jack Grealish would have maybe benefited or made some better decisions there too. So Pep made a gamble. I don't necessarily know if it was this that necessarily backfired on them. Though obviously Mateus Nunes is the one that makes the mistake. So maybe you can say that. The other thing is the way that Gavardiol was sometimes basically going from center back into midfield, almost like he was kind of in the John Stones role. That was a little bit different. So we had someone next to Gundogan. Maybe that can be their short-term fix. I don't really know. Having Kyle Walker to be kind of next to Ruben Diaz, I think he's doing that because not only Kyle Walker can't necessarily, doesn't really have the best recovery base. I think he's trying to baby Ruben Diaz, and I think you saw that in the second half. You saw that for when Rasmus was able to get in behind. I think you saw that for the Ahmad goal, the second Ahmad goal as well. And then the other thing too is so you got Kyle Walker, who's not really going to get forward. You've got Bernardo Silva, who's just there, and he's not really going to get much help. And I just feel like you don't really have any kind of support to help out that right side. And I'm used to Man City having Mahrez on that side, being able to take people on, being able to have Sterling over or Jesus overlapping him, and that always being a terror. And Man City don't really have that anymore. And so getting into like how this starts, Mason Mount gets injured after 10 minutes, so all of a sudden we see something that was entirely different than maybe what Amorim was setting up with. Feel a little bit for Mason Mount, to be honest, because finally it looked like maybe he recovered from some of those setback injuries. He looked pretty good in their Conference League game, but it's not to be. Kobe Mano comes on, and the funny thing about him coming on is you kind of forget it was just 5-ish months ago when he was one of the scorers in the FA Cup final that helped them win. Garnacho was the other one, and Garnacho didn't make the bench, so it's crazy how quickly things can fly there. But getting into like Man United's shape before we get started with the game, one thing is so they didn't necessarily do a whole lot with the ball. One thing that you did see is Kevin De Bruyne, uh, Foden, and Holland were extremely lazy out of possession. And as the game went on, United kind of playing with their back three, it helped Onana and it helped them always having additional options. It made it easier to pass from the back. It made it easier for them to build up. And as the game went on, United started to have some success keeping the ball. And City's quote unquote press can't get anywhere near them. And you really start to see that show up in the second half. So the back three as well with Delict, way more comfortable, looks more comfortable than he did playing in a back four or back two. He's got license to carry it, so that we were seeing that as well. When the space was there, he got an eye for a pass, and we saw the additional protection allowed them both to be really really aggressive. And you saw them breathing down Kevin De Bruyne and Phil Foden's neck, and just you never saw neither Kevin De Bruyne or Phil Foden able to spin around and get past those center backs. Pressing them. The pressure was good enough to get Kevin De Bruyne or Phil Foden to pass backwards, and that's always a win for the defending team. in that kind of situation. So and then the other thing to talk about with Maguire was able to handle Holland, and if he didn't, he had help. Ugarte and Meno were quite good at least making the midfield at least somewhat compact. And again, this is just we're not used to saying I'm not used to talking about this with Man United, and Morm is coming and it at least has given them a little bit more control than they've had in the past, and they are a little bit more compact. Now that said, they are maybe worse going offensively, but it doesn't really matter because they win this game. So, but the game did start off as a slog. So United can't really do anything. There was an early moment where it feels like there's a poor Holland touch lead through Delict firing a ball to find Mount. He turns, tries to find something into Dallo. Bernardo Silva can't track back. And then Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan also played out of that Delict pass, but Dallo can only has Rasmus for an option, can't really find him. We do get an early City chance. There's, I think it's like maybe the first is it the first, shot? No, it's not. There's a terrible pass by Mazurai, to Kobe Mano. Doku has it. It's not the easiest ball, but I think a better ball squeezed in maybe finds Holland. Instead, it goes to Delict. Then there's a Kevin De Bruyne pass to Foden. Goes in the box. Early cross by Foden is nice, but Harry Maguire is kind of just there to just head the ball away. Otherwise, I think Holland versus Martinez, they probably score there. This 20-ish minutes in, and it's 66% possession in City's favor. And then the first 20 minutes, we finally get a shot. It's Foden on a volley. Pretty good hit, but it's just kind of a chance, really. But you're starting to see City's issues now. We're seeing Doku get the ball, and he's never got anyone ahead of him. We're seeing occasions where he's able to get by Mazurai, but then he's got Delict on him. And then he's trying to find crosses, but can't find Holland. Foden keeps running, to him, not really around him or in front of him. And the other thing, again, was Doku sometimes wasn't really hugging the touchline, at least in that first half. He was creeping more inwards. And when Mateus gets the ball and restarts, he doesn't really have options to really play, with instead. It's way too cluttered for him. So he's going, back sideways as well. It was kind of killing their momentum. And City did not have any momentum in that first half. And then we get a Man United chance, and this is, I think, the 20th, 27th minute or so. Ahmad finally is able to get into a dangerous area. He drags a shot wide, so probably could have done a little bit better there. It is offside, so maybe it doesn't count anyways, but here's a little hint of what they can cause. There's a triangle here of quick passing between Mesere, Meno, and Ugarte. And then Ugarte does well to thread little ball in that Gavardio isn't seeing. It's close, but I think, maybe even the first touch it's probably their first touch in the penalty area, so they're finally able to get a little bit in behind. It's some clever playing that they're able to finally get in behind Mateus Nunes. Mateus Nunes, I think, like jumps, or the chance comes from Nunes basically stepping up to try to stop Mano, but Mano is able to avoid that challenge, finds Ugarte instead, and then Ugarte has a really nice, clever ball to play in Diallo. And Ugarte had a clever ball for Hoyland's goal versus Nottingham Forest just last week. So Ugarte is starting to be a little bit better for them, in my opinion. And then we get to the first goal. It's just Gavardio scoring on the header. It's one of those where Kevin De Bruyne was having this a couple of times where they were trying to do kind of quick restart, kind of free kicks or corner kicks, and for the most part, he was always getting it blocked, and he also gets blocked here, but he does get enough to have the spin, kind of still find a teammate, and then it's just Gavardio, being pretty good in the air, and he has been good in the air for them. It's kind of funny because I'm going to be a little bit critical of Gavardio later on, but he has been very good, at least scoring for them, and I think he's the second leading goal scorer for them now. Uh, and the other thing too is, so it's finally we get something going. We're finally going to see this game open up. We're going to get some fireworks, and we get some fireworks maybe the other way because basically Kyle Walker and Rasmus Højlund decide to join heads together. Walker tries to get Højlund, sent off. In the era of VAR, that was quite not good. The announcers were having to go at him, and I think rightly so. It's quite childish from Walker. It just kind of shows where Walker's head is at, and it's just I think it's maybe a kind of a sign that they're not really thinking necessarily of just being showing up and being better than everyone else. I think that was a telling moment. And then we have a kind of a rare kind of Doku freak footed cross, left footed cross, decent. But it just goes to no one. Instead, they then are able to just recycle it. They're able to find Foden the ball, and I think this is when Foden has the hit that creeps a little bit wide. I think it's blocked as well. And then there was also a free kick that Kevin De Bruyne basically overhit. So we get to halftime. There's not there's not much here. There's 0 shots from Man United at this point. There's just 0 threat. There was it, that one chance they got Ahmad, in behind, but, that was it kind of it. They were still in the game, not getting kinda open like they have been in all those games with Erik ten Hag, so you can maybe say that there is a sense of control, here, but also I feel like it's due to City just being really, really bad now out of possession with any team that they play with, and that, I think, showed up even more as we went into the second half. And the second half, City did not start off well. There's again the back three is starting to actually show up and cause them some problems. So they swing it out wide to Lisandro Martinez. Bernardo Silva is just standing around and make marking really no one. The pass to Diego Dallo on the touchline is really easy and wide open, and he's able to find it. And then Kyle Walker is late to close in on Dallo, so he's able to slip in the ball to find Bruno. Bruno then goes upfield, finds Rasmus, and United finally get a few touches into the penalty box. I mean, nothing really comes from it, but you finally for a team that had no shots, no efforts, no nothing in the first half, all of a sudden you look, it's like the second minute in the second half, and Rasmus is at least your striker is getting some touches in the penalty box. And then a few minutes later, Doku loses the ball. Ahmad's able to break up field. Nothing again comes from this as well. But City are frantic. They start making mistakes. They can't clear the ball away. Kevin De Bruyne is pushed off the ball, and then Doku basically loses it. Holland has to track all the way back just to clear it. Uh, and we're starting to kind of see this as well. City on goal kicks are just launching the ball to upfield. Uh, they're launching it to Holland, which is not the worst idea, but Holland has no one near him. There's no City player joining within 25 or 30 yards of him, and he's got to win the ball back between three center backs on him, and he just can't. Man United keep winning the ball back when they're doing that. We're not used to seeing that either. Ederson making a start here when it had been Ortega in some of these was a bit of a head scratcher too. Ederson, played versus Juventus and was not necessarily good, but Ortega didn't do his best versus Crystal Palace the week before either. And all this used to be Ederson's kind of bread and butter when he used to be able to bait the press into him and then just be able to pick out any kind of pass on the field he wanted. And he wasn't even he wasn't even risking it. I don't know if Pep told him to go long just to do it, but, Man City weren't able to keep control of the ball because of this, basically. They just kept doing it by themselves. And you're asking Holland to, people were going at Holland, you're asking Holland to win, basically with 3 people around you. It's really gonna be very hard to do that. Holland can maybe win the first ball, he's not gonna be able to keep it when you've got 3 basically dressed on him. He didn't have any help near him. Um and then we do have a City chance, and, speaking of Holland, this was probably the closest Man City were to getting on the score sheet as far as, like, open play. Mateus Nunes gets on the ball, and finally someone plays an early floated ball, into Holland, making a run, and here he's gotten in front of Harry Maguire, and it just goes out of his reach, to control it. And I think it's not the easiest ball, and it's one of those where I think his legs just aren't long enough. If it's just hit slightly less, I think he is able to control it. I think basically it is City's second goal, and at that point 2-0, that probably do kind of see it out. And it comes from Mateus Nunes. Mateus Nunes finally being able to get up on the ball and finally able to be a little adventurous going forward. And I just feel like you maybe nullified what he could have offered you in that respect. Mateus Nunes was not having a bad game until later, and I've already talked about that. But after that, all of a sudden, United flipped the game around entirely. There's like a 5 minute stretch from here on out where they're just passing around and they're not really going anywhere. But City are just watching it happen, and City are getting passed around in their own stadium, and it's kind of unsettling. City are going 4 or 5 minutes of game time without touching the ball, without getting anyone near the ball. And again, Man United just kind of doing all of this where they're not really crossing the midway line, so Pep probably didn't care about it. But you're getting a side that is finally getting some touches on the ball. Finally, they're getting some confidence in. This is a team that is probably terrorized, tormented them. At least tormented their fans. You imagine it's tormented their players as well. For the most part, it's a United team that has experienced a lot of these pretty bad beatings that Pep has given them of late. And you're allowing this team to grow in confidence, and all this is happening simply because you're not pressing at all. Foden is not doing anything at all. Kevin De Bruyne isn't. Holland maybe is trying, but for the most part, he's just kind of looking around. He's waiting for Man United to go a little bit forward to cross midfield, and then maybe City will try to do something. But I think I think they screwed up by allowing City or Man United to get comfortable, and then all of a sudden, that possession, those passes, that change, leads to something. So we have an Ahmed header, where it forces a pretty good Ederson save. So we start to see chances come out of it. Kobe Mano here plays something up the line to Amad Diallo, who gets it, then turns centrally. And so again, this is where they've been playing around from the back, and then all of a sudden they finally start to build up a little bit. So Kobe Mano gets the ball from, I think it's Mazurai. Quickly ball into Ahmad. Ahmad has Nunez on him, but he turns and basically goes centrally. And so he passes Nunez, and then Gundogan is nowhere to be found. And again, there's no kind of help there. Um, and plays it to Lisandro Martinez, who then has freedom to carry it upfield as well. Bernardo Silva has since followed Bruno into midfield and kind of left open left open Bruno or left open Lisandro Martinez, and then basically Dallo is able to gets the ball upfield, and he's closed down by Kyle Walker and Bernardo Silva finally catching up. But Bernardo Silva leaves now Bruno Fernandes when he does try to double him up, and he's not quick enough to do it. There's still an open to find in Bruno. Bruno gets it, and then Bruno has a dangerous cross, and the cross finds Ahmad's head, and it's Ahmad Diallo that starts the move, and he ends the move, and Nunez for the first time loses him twice. Is a warning shot, and basically the warnings continue. So City can't clear the ball following a corner kick. Holland is basically defending the whole time. Eventually, he's the one that actually clear the ball upfield. But when he does that, that means there's no one else upfield, so he's just giving it back to Man United, and then Rasmus is taken out. So United recycle. Lisandro gets on the ball from Manana. There's no one on City to pressure him again, and then he floats the ball up into the box for Rasmus. It's a really well hit ball by Lisandro Martinez. Rasmus chases it, and he gets into the opposite end of. He gets on the opposite side of Ruben Diaz, and Diaz lunges, wraps his leg around Hoyland, and knocks the ball away, or tries to knock the ball away. But he draws a lot of contact, and I don't think he actually does get any contact on the ball. And I feel like it's a stone call penalty. But he's able to somehow get away with it. I don't really know how, but it just shows how vulnerable Ruben Diaz is to just runs in behind. And again, maybe Pep just went into that a little worried even before this, and then you just saw it play out a little bit, and then we see another chance. It's the Bruno miss. And again, in real time, you've thought that was probably it. That was the chance. Doku here is pushed off the ball again by Mazurai, who started to feel himself a little bit better in the second half. Then he finds Rasmus posting up, who then sees Bruno making a run, splitting between Kyle Walker and Ruben Diaz, and Rasmus plays a beautiful peach of a ball to thread in Bruno making a run ahead, and Diaz again maybe a bit of a liability, as is Kyle Walker. And Bruno in on goal and just opts for the chip over Ederson and misses wide. It is just Bruno misses the chance, but it is incredible play by Mazurai, Rasmus, and Bruno till the miss. It's just the quickness of the move. It's the type of goal that we're used to seeing Man City kind of pull off regularly, and it feels like they can't now. And then Pep makes some changes. He brings on Kovacic for Kevin De Bruyne. You understand that. You give him some legs in midfield. You don't have to chase the game. You still have the lead. Amazingly enough. And then he brings on Grealish for Doku. I'm not necessarily going to say that's necessarily what kills the game off, but we're maybe seeing why Grealish doesn't necessarily work on the left side, because you don't remember Grealish really doing anything. And then Amarim makes some changes as well. We see Anthony come on, basically plays a wing back. So we're seeing Amarim basically go for this. We're seeing Xerxes come on for Rasmus, and we're seeing Jura come on for basically Mateus de Ligt. So Mazraoui comes off and Rasmus comes off. And now Nunez has to handle both Anthony and Amad Diallo. And now Amad Diallo can basically go with Gvardiol a little bit more if they want to. Uh, and then basically what happens is we get a Man City corner kick. And as I mentioned before, it's one of those where Mateus Nunes just decides to be on the right side on those corner kicks, and they're not able to get him back on the other side when he does get the ball later on, and he just gets the ball from, I guess, Ruben Diaz or someone, and he sees Ruben Diaz having the hand pointing towards Ederson to go backwards, and maybe there was a different kind of cue, but that's the kind of cue he took. And it's a terrible ball, and he basically plays it right to Amad Diallo. That where Diallo is anticipating it. He's sprinting already before the pass even happens, and there's no one to get even close to him. That said, Diallo maybe made a mistake not to actually go for goal when he maybe should have, but it doesn't really matter because Mateus Nunes then freaks and then basically runs into him when he's in the penalty area. Uh, so there's a lot of people to blame here, in my opinion. But obviously, in the end, it goes to Mateus Nunes. Just lost his head, and then Savio came on for Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva shifted back to midfield. I don't get why Savio didn't actually start the game. Yeah, to be honest, maybe he doesn't do enough work defensively. I don't really know. It's not really like, again, Man United, went into after the first half, didn't have a shot, didn't have anything on target. I just feel like Pep is playing too scared now, and he's doing is nullifying his attack. Uh, but the other thing too is now that you've brought in Savio to come in, he's not. It's like the 89th minute. It's a weird kind of attacking kind of move because you're still, uh, you you're trying to maybe see the game. Maybe he's just desperate to get the win. I don't really know. It's 89th minute. I don't know how much someone can change the game that much. But what happens is he's not up to game speed, and he's thinking his guy is the mark. Maybe Bruno Fernandez and Bernardo Silva is also keeping tight on Bruno, and that means there's just no one on Lisandro Martinez when he gets the ball. And he again has time to just see his options, and just he's high upfield as well. You're seeing that a little bit more with the back three. He's got more license to be a little higher up than maybe before, and he plays an excellent weighted ball over the box. Again, it goes over Ruben Diaz's head, and Diallo scores it. And already talked about that. So I think it's just one of those things where the Man United having more control of the ball, I think it's aided by Man City just being so bad out of possession, but at the same time, this is something we never really saw Eric Ten Hag have, versus Man City. We've seen Man United have some success versus Man City in a couple of games, but in those, it felt like that was kind of either one-offs or, they withstood like 25 shots of Man City, or they had whatever the possession would have been, it would have been 70-30 or whatnot. It was almost even at the Etihad. And again, a classic it was not, but Man United are not really going to care. Uh, and I think the what it did is it cemented what everyone's opinion on this City team is now. Because I think before the game there was all this talk. I think the NBC people were talking about it, where they thought City could only be like a point away, or what, maybe it was 3 points from actually Arsenal after this terrible stretch of form. And all of a sudden that stops abruptly. I think Pep after the games, talked about that as well, saying he's out of ideas, and I'm going to get into that. What I mean by that, very shortly. It ends with 10 shots a piece, three on target a piece, and then 52% to 48. Man City with 432. That's a lower kind of passing number for Man City, you would expect. And I think a lot of it was because Ederson being back and they were just going long in the second half when on restarts or goal kicks, and just feels like all they were doing is giving the ball back to Man United, and Man United were just at that point just kind of fine to just kind of keep it a little bit. So we will get started with Man United. So the Amorim era has arrived, I guess you can say. Again, not a classic, but it's going to be ecstasy for the fan base nonetheless. Because this is a fan base that has heard Manchester is red growing up with the Fergie dominance, and then for the most part for the last decade or plus, they've been put to sleep. They've been dormant, since Pep has arrived, or whenever the Dubai takeover happened in like '08, or whenever they won their first league in 2012. Uh, and again, they've been a couple of times when they've had some success. They've had some nice memories, but again, it was just kind of one-offs. It was Paul Pogba being individually brilliant in a game. It was, it would it would be they'd be playing in a shell and withstanding again all those shots and just kind of winning off counters. For the most part, winning possession at the end, at least in a half, is a statement. I think it's a statement for both clubs. How did they do this? I think basically they win it with Lisandro Martinez, and it's funny enough because he had a poor game today, uh, but he's able to be way more aggressive. So that kind of suits him a little bit, and he's able to be just because he's higher upfield. He's able to get the ball kind of towards the midway line, and he's got an eye for a pass. He can float some nice balls upfield, but that only works if you have willing runners ahead. Amad Diallo was the only one that really did offer them some pace. Now Rasmus was able to get behind maybe once, as well, but they were really, really missing that. Bruno sometimes as well. Bruno was making clever runs in the final third, but he wasn't really offering that kind of ball over the top kind of run. And I just thought that it would have been perfect to also feature Garnacho, and maybe we saw him come on in the second half here. I just thought they needed this kind of the setup is not going to work versus a lot of teams. It works when you're up against basically you can go into this kind of like a cup final where you don't really care how pretty it is. You just kind of want to eke out either a draw because you're away at Man City's stadium as well. Uh, if you're playing against, because we saw this was Nottingham Forest. If you're playing this kind of way, this kind of setup, I just think if you're playing at home, it looks like the manager is going to play this kind of way no matter what, no matter what the opponent is. And I just don't think they don't necessarily have the maybe depth, or I don't really know how well this will work over a full season, but it doesn't really matter. They're going to celebrate this one. Ahmed Diallo is fitting as well because he's been Ruben Amorim's kind of best player since he's arrived, whether in wing back role or in this kind of 10 role that they've given him. Manuel Ugarte is starting to come good for them, so that's helping out as well. Um, and then, the negatives to talk about, like I mentioned, with Garnacho and Rashford kind of being disciplined, it was what they offered is what the game lacked, and then Diallo did to deliver that with pace because you've got Kyle Walker out there, and just no one else was giving him any kind of fit. So you have the Mount injury, so that hurts him as well. That moves Bruno a little bit higher up, and again, versus maybe more kind of a pressing kind of team. I don't really know if Kobe Mano and Ugarte are going to work as a midfield. I've already talked about that before as well. Uh, so again, either the back three staple that's going to be the way they line up, either for City or Ipswich or someone else. So can Omorum adapt a bit? That's kind of where we're going to have to go. And then with Man City, I think this is perhaps maybe worst game of the stretch because it shows he doesn't really have ideas how to fix this, and he's just throwing darts. So I think the game by itself, if it was a one-off, would be fine. As like, okay, Mateus Nunes lost his head. Okay, Gvardiol, dumb back heel clearance. It is what it is. In the context of going 11 games without a win, this is the one where they did not look a competent side. Defensive errors aside, they were creating chances for Bournemouth. They were creating for Spurs, Brighton, Crystal Palace. Uh, Here, they really did not look like a threat at all. And you've got yes, it's Man United. It's a big rival. You understand, a big club. In the table, they're 13th place, and we just they kind of outpossessed. They out footballed you in the second half, and you allowed it. There was no way to disrupt what Man United were doing when they were just kind of just passing the ball, just kind of passing. There was not a whole lot of threat there, and it just feels like Pep is so worried about being hit on the transition, he's nullified their attack going forward, and so I feel like played the game scared, and the way that they're setting up, the way that they allowed Man United to basically have the ball. They didn't commit numbers for it. Pep basically tried to. I think it tried to eke out maybe a 1-0 kind of ugly game, and that's not really the manager we've come to know. So his complete fear of being hit on the transitions. Uh, the things that he has done to try to nullify that, we don't have fullbacks anymore offering width, any kind of overloads. Mateus Nunes was played, and he was played defensively. Sometimes he was getting the ball in midfield to kind of make a number there. We never really saw him out wide of Doku. We never saw him giving him any kind of overlap. We saw last year when Doku had his best games was when Gvardiol was playing out wide, and Gvardiol would make an overlap. And just when you're a defender, you're basically into a 2v1. You don't know which one you're going to take. And so the run usually takes a path that you have to think about, and then that allows the ball carrier to be either play the run, play the guy making the run, or to keep it. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing overloads with this Man City team anymore. I think he doesn't want to commit bodies forward. He's too scared. There was no Rico Lewis this game because of because of the red card versus Crystal Palace, but he wasn't really good versus Juventus. So I don't really know if maybe Mateus Nunes played because he didn't have Rico Lewis, but that says it all too. I don't think Rico Lewis is their best left back idea. They are struggling significantly. The injury to Rodri is important. We don't always have to repeat that, but the injury to Ake and Akanji now and Stones, I think, is maybe affecting them as much. With Nottingham Forest, we didn't see this. We saw a City side that had Gavardiol playing wide. It didn't have Kyle Walker. It had Akanji out wide. It had It had some width. It had an ability to play through lines. It was able to find, Kevin De Bruyne, able to be a little bit more, attack minded, able to find Erling Haaland, and we didn't see any of this here. So this was surprising. I mean, Mateus Nunes is going to get blamed for it. Again, I don't feel he was necessarily terrible. But again, I don't really know what Jeremy Doku is doing, playing narrow. And the more we kind of seeing Jeremy Doku, he's kind of he's turning into Jack Grealish, and that's not really that's not a compliment. Jamie Doku can try to take people on, but he doesn't do take ons nearly as much. And when he beats someone, there's never really any kind of end product to it. So that's starting to be a problem for them. Pep doesn't like Savio anymore, so that's an issue when you're playing Bernardo Silva on the wing. And one thing I haven't really talked about nearly enough is you're not able to push the ball quickly. So when Pep says his ideas aren't working anymore, I think this is what he's referring to, where he can play this possession style, recycle guys on the wing that he's used to. He's been able to get away with that, and now he doesn't like pacey wingers. He doesn't like people that take gambles and lose the ball. And I think it's kind of fitting that Amad Diallo is the one that wins Man United the game because it's a player that Pep doesn't have or Pep doesn't value. Um, and I think because you don't have that 1v1 ability out wide, everything is so scrunched together in the middle. Kevin De Bruyne and Phil Foden are clashing now. They're basically, I think you only have to play one or the other. And as we saw last year, Phil Foden actually was their player of the campaign, well, offensive player of the campaign. Now Kevin De Bruyne was coming off the injury. Kevin De Bruyne still is maybe coming off an injury. Kevin De Bruyne started the season quite good for them, and Phil Foden has taken a while to really find his boots. I don't really know what the answer would be there, but I almost don't think you can play both because they're clashing way too often. But two ball to feet playmakers that need options ahead of them, need runners ahead of them, and they don't have it. They have Holland, and that's it. Um, and they're looking to be on the end of a move, in my opinion. And the other thing too is last season they had Alvarez, and I think the Alvarez loss is affecting them way more than we're used to, because the way Alvarez played, Alvarez would not play underneath or play uh, really far away from Erling Haaland. He would almost shatter him. Where if he would get to a ball, he would get to a point where if defenders were marking Haaland, basically, he would make sure he would time his run to get behind. Where when a cross would come, the defender is worried about Haaland, and Alvarez is right behind just in case a ball follows him or finds him. And they don't have that anymore. You figured Foden would suit that role, but we're not seeing Foden be anywhere near as aggressive, anywhere near hungry that we're used to seeing, and it is weird. But one thing I was thinking about is could you find a way to play Kevin De Bruyne kind of deeper, and then you have Phil Foden as your kind of 10, further ahead, but maybe that exposes you a little bit defensively. But we're seeing that right now with Gundogan, and that's not really working out either. So I don't really know what the solution is, and I've already talked about that. Erling Haaland being completely by himself, so you're allowing three slow center backs to keep him quiet. That's not good. Um, and I think the funny thing you look at Erling Haaland versus a team that who just played this Nottingham or this Man United team. It was Nottingham Forest, and it was Chris Wood. And Chris Wood caused Man United more trouble than Erling Haaland did. And it's not necessarily that Chris Wood is better, but he's got Joe Da Silva, he's got Gibbs White, he's got Hudson Odoi, he's got Anthony Lenga, he's got what Haaland doesn't have. And it's getting to a point where if you can zero in and just stop, it's easier said than done. But if you can stop Erling Haaland really either getting into the box or getting behind you, if you can almost get to a point where you can't make him turn on you, maybe I mean he's so good in the air still, but you can maybe nullify a little bit of their attack, and we're starting to see that. Last year Foden and Alvarez was able to help out and supply when Holland wasn't always converting. Now they don't really have that, and when Holland doesn't bag for them, City are struggling. They did get Kevin Kovacic back. Maybe that fixes things a little bit. You can play someone with legs next to Gundogan if Pep wants to do that. Maybe he'll be less scared on transitions, but we've seen City struggle in a number of ways in this stretch. It's not just one or the other. They're struggling with teams high pressing them, like we saw with Bournemouth and Spurs and Liverpool. They're struggling with teams sitting off and looking for the counter with Juventus and Porto, and now United. And with Brighton, they just simply couldn't handle long switches on the wings. And I thought for Palace, Brighton, and Liverpool, they couldn't handle duels in the center of the field. So I think Pep has forced the baby Ruben Diaz. Already talked about that. So to sum it up, they have no fullbacks to offer additional support. They can't go long and attack quickly anymore. You can launch it to Holland, and that's really it. Um, you can't play a high line because of that. So because of that, you can't press high as well. You're almost playing in a mid block now, and it is we're seeing this team age. We're seeing a lot of things here. It feels like Pep has to almost keep his players back to stop this, and they don't have a midfield that's good out of possession like we're used to seeing. And again, part of that is not just Gundogan. Foden and Kevin De Bruyne are kind of duds out of possession. So again, Kovacic maybe solves some of that. Um, and the one thing to kind of go back to Waji a little bit. One thing I haven't said brought up yet is this is similar now to when Klopp lost Van Dijk in 2021. I thought this wouldn't necessarily be as bad because I thought this would have been their Kevin De Bruyne situation last season when they lost him, and they were able to get away with it because of both Hoden and because of Rodri. When Klopp lost Van Dijk in 2021, what he did was he tried to play the same way. You missed what you basically he tried to basically play the same way. He moved some players around, and he didn't understand that that doesn't always work. And I think Pep is struggling with that too. We're seeing people playing in different positions, out of positions now. You're trying to find a way to just fit what you're lacking, and what they're lacking is it's not just what they're lacking is what they don't have, essentially. So that is where we are, and this will be the last time I go in depth about Man City. Really, it's becoming repeatable now, and we'll see what they do in January. But until then, that'll probably be it. And then with Liverpool and Fulham, this game ends 2-2. See how we're doing for time. Um, could be better, could be worse. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the game because well, I shouldn't say that. The game was absolutely insane, but I think people have already so much time has passed. That's already people that care already know what happened. So Mateus Pereira gets a 1-1 or Rano. This is one where they've already had Liverpool have already had a warning. So that's kind of playing a role into it too. Uh, where Harry Wilson was getting in behind on Andre Robertson, and I'm going to pause it for a second. All right, so we'll try that again. Whoops. All right. So with the Liverpool game, we have Pereira getting the first goal, and then Robertson gets sent off, and then we get a game that I was not expecting. I don't think a lot of people would have been expecting. Uh, it was very strange because Fulham coming off the performance they had versus Arsenal, everyone is praising them for being really really sound defensively. And the awkward thing is you couldn't do that kind of strategy when when you're playing with a team that's down a man. And I think maybe Marco Silva overthought things, and that'll probably be kind of a theme that I get to. Is maybe he went with trying to because basically Fulham got into a point where they basically sat in what you would call a mid block, and they weren't really necessarily pressing Liverpool that much. And Slot decided to make some changes where he didn't actually make a sub after he went down a man. He moved a lot of people around, and I'll get to that. Uh, but I think it backfired a little bit on Marco Silva because you go into halftime, Liverpool are not only dominating the ball, like dominating a lot, not even close. They're starting to get chances, and they get one very, very late one with Luis Diaz, and then in the second half, everything entirely flips, and then you really see that in the stats, and then Cody Gakpo right after halftime, Rodrigo Munoz makes it 2-1, and Liverpool have to come from behind again, and they are able to do it with Diego Jota. So it is points dropped at Anfield. The title gap, as you can say, is only 2 points now with the game in hand still, but still it is 2 points. But again, the way that I don't say fully dominated because Fulham were also well deserved. They were deserving of a point. Um, one of the things I can say is I thought Marco Silva was getting it wrong, and then he did make an adjustment that did, put things back in his favor, and that was to utilize the wings, utilize the width. He finally used, the legs of USA's own Anthony Robinson, and it was just kind of funny how I even tweeted about it. It was a moment where you just saw it in real time. Liverpool's Andy Robinson kind of losing his, chain as you would say, to him, to America's own, left back. Don't necessarily say, best left back now in the Prem and Anthony, Robinson for Fulham, but he has a lot of the qualities that at least Liverpool's Robinson, had when he was younger. Maybe he could be a little bit better on the ball, but he's got a terrific delivery, and if he not gonna necessarily say, him on Fulham is the worst place to be right now. Fulham are, contending for a lot of things right now. He's got a pretty good coach in Marco Silva, and he really is suited for this kind of counter attacking team. But not just that, a team that is willing to allow the fullback to get higher up. And basically, you saw a really good connection between him and Iwobi, and unfortunately for Liverpool fans, that really did work out for them. But uh, before getting started, I was not gonna lie, pretty comfortable coming into this because I knew no Calvin Bassey and no Anderson. Those are the two best center backs, and I figured, well, Issa Diop, and I just didn't know who else it would have been. And it turns out it was this Cuenca guy, and he turned out to have a really good second half, really good game, at least in the minor, like latter stages of the first half and the second half. It's not going to necessarily show up, stats wise. I don't think his sofa score was necessarily that good. But there were so many times when he actually, maybe it was even Robinson, where Salah was starting to get the better of him, and there would always be Cuenca there to just sweep up basically to clear a whole lot of danger. He was doing a very good job of that. Right before Jota scores the goal that gets Liverpool tied again, Cuenca actually stops an attack where it feels like that could have happened even before that. So Cuenca was having a pretty good game, and then you have Sasa Lukic and Berga, and then you have Harry Wilson, who is a former Liverpool grad, and he balled out as well. Mateus Pereira, Iwobi on that side with Robinson, and it looked like the idea really was to target that side. And unfortunately, it feels like Marco Silva just had it in his game plan. He didn't buy the Trent Alexander-Arnold hype that he had been he had become a better defender, or he just didn't want to go at Virgil van Dijk and Andy Robinson. I don't really know, but they targeted him. They targeted that side a lot, and it really did work for them. They targeted both. They were going down with Harry Wilson down Andy Robinson's side, and like I said before, even before the goal happens, they were creating some danger. But also, I mean, the way the game actually started, there's an early high press by Liverpool. You get in the turnover. Robertson gets taken down by Usi Diop. He swipes at the knee and he gets a yellow card for this. I thought it's borderline red. It's quite high. It's late, but it's only a yellow. And then Gakpo finds Diaz. I think it's bad offsides call. Could have been kind of close as well. The Liverpool's lineup was a little bit different. I didn't actually go into that. We see Luis Diaz play through the middle. Darwin Núñez was rested. So that was a bit of a surprise as well. Gakpo played on the left, and frankly, that is starting to be, I think, his position. I think he's maybe even. I think he's got a claim for that over anyone that can play on the left. Maybe Jota was standing, but Gakpo is starting to. I think someone said say he's got 7 goals for his last 10 games, or something like that. Maybe it's only at Anfield, but he's been quite. He's been quite good when it comes to in product and as far as just performance wise, and just anytime you watch him, he's not going to have the unbelievable 1v1 ability. He's not going to beat you with steppers or anything, but he is such a mammoth of a person that you just favor him in a 1v1 duel, in any kind of aerial duel, or you just he's quick as well, and just it feels like he can just kind of bully people a little bit, and basically we're starting to see that a little bit, and that's what happens for his goal. Uh, but there are a couple moments here where Wilson has tried to go at Robinson and gotten past him. There are a couple times where Virgil van Dijk has to actually clear things up. So all of a sudden we're already getting some warning signs. Both sides are getting at least some decent attacks going. There's like 8 minutes into the game now, but Liverpool are moving the ball quickly. They're I think they're being a little bit more direct than Arsenal. I've got a note about that as well. I also have a note that maybe the high wind maybe affected Arsenal's game plan, I guess, a week ago. But watching this, and I just didn't think there was no way this was going to be like this dull kind of 1-0 kind of game, and we got again we got what I was not expecting. So we get to the first goal. It's Anthony Robinson on a cross, what a cross, and it's basically just Iwobi and Robinson just does an overlap. Trent is too late to recognize, and the cross is in. It's a perfect cross to the back post, and Robinson just is kind of caught a little bit. And Pereira, full stretch. It's a really good finish by Pereira to connect on the volley, and then uh, basically basically right after that, Robertson gets sent off. And what happens here is it's another case where Fulham actually do a pretty good job of moving it from one side of the field to the other, and then Robinson basically there's really nothing to come from this. The ball comes to him. They're trying to find Harry Wilson getting behind him, but it goes right to Robinson, and he just takes a terrible touch. And I think the thing in my head is, because I don't want to just really go at him, but the thing in my head is he got clattered in like 40 seconds into the game, and people thought he was going to be, or at least the announcers thought maybe he was going to have to come off. And instead, he played through it. I don't know if he had a knock or what, but he didn't look right, since that. And then he takes a terrible touch here, and the terrible touch allows basically Harry Wilson to get a or it's Pereira to get the opposite to get on the other side of him basically, and then Robinson freaks and then basically takes him out. There's been some talks mentioned how it maybe the red card was not the best idea. I can't really say anything because I thought once it happened, he was immediately going to be gone. I don't really think there's a whole lot of gripes. What I will gripe about though, a whole lot of gripes about that. What I will gripe about though instead is I think the referee had a mar for other reasons. So I mentioned how the foul on Robinson I thought was iffy, but it's not just that. There's a foul on I think it's Ryan Gravenberch where Pereira just completely stamps on him, and that's just kind of allowed. I mean, that looked quite bad, and then Pereira does something like that again. So there are two strikes there, in my opinion. He gets away with, and then in the second half, I think Anthony Robinson or someone grabs Gravenberch, shirt from behind when he's trying to lead a counter. That should have been a yellow card, and that possibly would have been a sending off as well. So I just thought the refing was a bit worth talking about. I'm not necessarily going to fully blame it. I think you can just blame Robinson. It is a horrid error, and I just think he freaks out. And I think he freaks out because whether or not it was the injury or not, he's just not the same player that he has been. And it's really kind of upsetting to see someone who you have you have supported, you have enjoyed uh, all of these times, because he's come in and he's been at the heart of all of this Klopp's success, really. And you're seeing someone that's kind of I don't say ruining their legacy, but when you see someone that's just not the same player that you've grown up to like watch over the years, it's awkward. and I feel like we are kind of starting to see him age a little bit, and Man City got experiences with Kyle Walker. It happens. Um, and he has done so much road running, and so much distance. He was always a bombing fullback, and Slot doesn't always want him to necessarily be a bombing fullback as well. And I think the awkward thing for him is sometimes they are trying to do this, experiment a little bit with this back three, at least a back three in early possession. Robinson, he doesn't really fit that, and when the games when he has been asked to kind of do that role, that side dies. There's no real support, and he's never really worked honestly with Luis Diaz. I think he works a little bit better with Gakpo. He's always worked better with Jota. So there's just some of that kind of coming into it where it is starting to get awkward, and we are getting into January. Does Liverpool maybe think of make a move on trying to maybe bring in a left back? The thing that's also really awkward is one of the things that Slot does is he moves Joe Gomez basically to be left back or left center back in this kind of situation. And Gomez was supposed to be the backup to Kanate. So, like I mentioned, uh, there was already, coming into this a a numbers issue or a squad issue when it came to depth. That's what happened with the Konate miss, and you're really starting to see that already. And there's not going to be. Well, I guess Robinson missed the cup game, so maybe he'll be good to go. I guess for Spurs, maybe he can bounce back. I don't really know. He was good for City. He was good versus Real Madrid, but I also mentioned he didn't have anyone that was able to really challenge him, and not necessarily like Harry Wilson you would have expected to challenge, and Wilson was getting behind him, and it wasn't good. So here we go. We get to the tweaks, and so I mentioned so first Slop doesn't sub anyone off, and what he basically does is he moves Ryan Gravenberch back, so he becomes a center back. He moves Gomez in the beginning to right back, and then Gakpo basically becomes the left back. Trent's higher up. He's almost like the right winger. Slots has since moved in, or Salah has since moved into the center forward spot, and then Luis Diaz is now the left wing. Jones and Szoboszlai are kind of the midfield controllers and ground duelers. And it's not terrible, but it's also not great, uh, mostly because of Gakpo. So Gakpo is not anticipating balls hitting over top of him, and Liverpool are getting lucky on a couple like really bad Wilson and Pereira. Like there's a Wilson or Pereira that makes a run that's completely unmarked, and then he has a cross to Jimenez, and I basically either goes to Van Dyke or Allison's able to read it and it goes to him. But that was that easily could have been a tap in as well, and at 2-0 when you're already down a man, that would have been game over. So Slot didn't like that, and he moved. So he moved Gomez to be more kind of a traditional left back, which he inverted into midfield later on. And Liverpool had possession and had control. He moved Trent back into his usual spot, so that makes sense. He moved Salah back to his usual right wing spot, that makes sense. Diaz false nine, like we saw in the beginning again, and all of a sudden we start to see Liverpool kind of have a little bit more control of the ball, and it's just Fulham are not really pressing, and they're just kind of just standing around. They're watching it, and one thing that's happening is Luis Diaz. Maybe I'll get to it later. Yeah, I guess I will. Luis Diaz in this false nine kind of role was weirdly making it so the numbers weren't really not in Liverpool's advantage. It didn't really feel like they were actually down a man. So I'll explain a little bit further. But we also right before halftime we start to see Salah start to get the better of Anthony Robinson. It's leading to some half chances, not necessarily anything full, and then we do get the Luis Diaz chance to make it maybe 1-1 at halftime. It's a brilliant ball, played into him where he's able to make a pretty good run into the box, and he just he can't get the header down. But I was even texting my buddies watching this that because the Arsenal game was going on, they were watching that, or I think Brentford maybe would have been playing as well, and he would have been no, I guess Brentford played Sunday. Buddies were watching the Arsenal game, and I was like, you guys can't believe what is happening in this game, and so I was thinking there would be worse teams to play down a man than Fulham because again, they were allowing Liverpool to have the ball, and one of the things that was really helping Liverpool was the way that they were playing Luis Diaz. And normally, I don't really like this. Normally, I want my number 9 to be looking to run off the back shoulder of a center back, or to be someone that is always ahead, annoying center backs essentially. the way Luis Diaz was playing is he was dropping into pockets, and when you're not doing a man marking kind of system, you're just kind of staying in a mid block, and you're just trying to make sure nothing really gets behind you. But you've got two center backs in that back four that were not following Luis Diaz, and so Luis Diaz was dropping into pockets in midfield where all of a sudden Liverpool have a numbers advantage. All of a sudden Liverpool have 3v2 advantages in many cases, and they were able to triangle around a little bit. And it was just, I just think Fulham were messing up a little bit by just allowing that. And the other thing was just not pressing at all. So when Joe Gomez has the ball, he's just able to carry it all the way up. Virgil van Dijk or whoever. And the other thing that's showing up as the game goes on, as Liverpool all of a sudden start to get more control of the ball, all of a sudden the crowd kind of gets back into it as well, and you started to see that as well. One of the things that they have that I don't think I wasn't watching Arsenal do this because I watched that Arsenal Fulham game a couple weeks ago. They have that Virgil van Dijk ball on a rope where it's a crossfield switch and it's high, and he can just Virgil van Dijk can always pick out Salah. Essentially, Salah is always willing to be a runner ahead, and you've got that in Liverpool's front line. Gakpo will make runs ahead when it's required. Luis Diaz can do it too, and when you're just playing a mid block, not necessarily a deep block, but a mid block, there is still space there. And Liverpool was still able to get some balls over the top to make it so it was an attacker versus a fullback 1v1 or a center back. But a lot of times they were going long, and Salah was doing a very good job to collect it, and then he was actually taking on Robinson 1v1 and beating him a couple of times. Now it wasn't always Robinson held his own too, but Salah was getting the better of him a couple of times. So it was very weird going into that second half. Liverpool are down a man. I'm not terribly concerned. And then we get the early Gakpo goal, uh, and that just comes from again it's an early switch, and then I think it goes from left side to the right side. Actually, what happens is Fulham somewhat have a counter on their have a chance to counter attack basically, and I think it's Raven Gravenberch that from the center back role. It just basically, I think he beats Anthony Robinson, beats Iwobi to a sprint to a loose ball. Has a great dive or has a great goes to ground basically to great tackle to win the ball back, and then Liverpool are able to advance it upfield, and it goes from I think it's Gakpo or it's Diaz from the left side to the right side. I think it's Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz finds Mo Salah on the kind of top of the box, and then he cuts in and does his usual left foot cross, and it's in a situation where just I think Luis Diaz possibly could have gotten it too, but Cody Gakpo, makes the run on sides. He's basically he's allowed to do this unmanned, and I think it's that little switch because Liverpool moved it quickly. I think between Diaz and Gakpo in the beginning of the move, I think the marker kind of lost him a little bit, and it's a stunning goal, and 1-1, and then basically 30 seconds after that, I think it's Cody Gakpo gets the ball again, and then he's trying for a shot that's blocked, but Joe Gomez is fouled in the box. This is the other one I forgot about. The announcers were being very kind on it. Um, I'll be less, I guess, I'll be a little bit more assertive, essentially, maybe it's a little bit homerish, but he's fouled, and I don't care if, I think it's Diop. I don't think if Diop or whoever is no, it's Tete. I don't care if Tete, means to do it or not. I don't even think he's looking. I think he's trying to block, the Gakpo shot, but he sticks his leg out, and then, coming into him is Joe Gomez, and Joe Gomez and him just completely clatter, and they clatter in the box, and I think that should have been PK. So that is just me, but and then it's awkward because it takes a while for Teddy to recover, and so Liverpool kind of lose a little of the momentum that they had after that because the crowd at this point is going bonkers, and then that allowed Fulham to kind of wake up, and that allowed Fulham to maybe change a little bit of what they were doing, and then maybe Marco Silva actually told them to use the wide areas a little bit more because one of the things that you think about when a team is playing down a man is usual or what the things that I've seen when teams screw up on when they're playing up a man is not overloading the wide areas enough. especially when a team is playing a back four. So I was really thankful that at least we had seen in the beginning. Then Fulham not really doing that, and then the second half we saw that a lot. And so, there's a let's see, they have a warning shot with Robinson. He makes another run, and then he has a cross into Harry Wilson. Harry Wilson can't control it, and the ball just misses the goal wide. There's another attack where Iwobi and Robinson again 1-2 upfield. The ball then finds Sasa Lukic. That shot is blocked for a corner kick. And what's funny enough, if Liverpool needed to score on their corner kick, they've done this a couple of times. They That's how they scored 2 goals for Aston Villa. Mo Salah actually looked like he maybe was in on goal, and then either he maybe the pass was taking him away from goal, but he doesn't try to do across the goal. He tries to beat him near post and misses the goal. Salah had a weird kind of second half, to be honest, but I'll get to that later. And then let's see. Then we have basically the Fulham goal where it again comes from. Uh, I think it's a change. It's a turnover of possession, and Fulham were able to just kind of move down that Trent's side basically, and what happens is Anthony Robinson basically out sprints or starts a sprint, or jogs basically past Trent Alexander Arnold, and Trent Alexander Arnold allows for it, and it gets to a point where Ryan Gravenberch has no help, and he can't really get there, and then Kwanzaa has since come on, and Kwanzaa, kind of gets screwed, or kinda messes up a little bit, here too, as he doesn't really he instead of maybe, sticking with his man, he's actually kind of baited out, to go to the ball, and he allows someone to just slip past him. I think it's is it Anthony Robinson? It's either Anthony Robinson or Irabi, and he slips past him, and, uh and then, basically once they get to, uh, once he gets to the byline, he is able to find a teammate in the box, and this is where Joe Gomez maybe messes up. Joe Gomez is, uh, basically he allows him to or Joe Gomez and Van Dijk, I mean, you can go to a lot of people for that goal. Van Dijk, first is maybe trying to block the pass to Harry Wilson on the other side, but he also allows, Rodrigo Munoz, who has since come on for Jimenez, he allows him to pass him, and, basically it's just kind of a back flick, and it catches Joe Gomez to go in as well. So you have the Fulham goal, and after that, you see more slot tweaks. So, yeah, I mentioned he's already brought on, Kwanzaa. He's brought Kwanzaa on. He's moved Gravenberch a little bit more into midfield now, and he's taken off, Trent, Alexander-Arnold, and the interesting thing is he brings on Harvey Elliott, and we also see more changes, in the attack. He brings on, Diego Jota, and he brings on Darwin Núñez. And so we basically have what I have is a 3-1-5. So you have Kwanzaa, Virgil van Dijk, and Joe Gomez, and that's the three. Then you have Ryan Gravenberch as the four. So you have almost like a diamond four, and you're playing them high up. And the thing that's interesting here is so you think about the numbers wise, that's 4, and then Fulham are playing basically a 4-4-2. So he's taken off Pereira and he's brought on Smith Rowe, and so you got Smith Rowe and Rodrigo Munoz, and then you have 2 in midfield and kind of the pivot, and then you have the wide players, and then you have the 2 fullbacks. I think they screwed up not trying to change that instead of a 4-4-2, maybe a 4-2-4 where you actually have 4 up front, because they weren't matching Liverpool for numbers, and it was just way too easy to just pass around just 2 or 3 players. That was happening a lot. So you see what ends with a 3-1-5. So Ryan Gravenberch goes back into midfield to be the quote unquote number 6 role. He's done a fantastic job at center back, and now he's back into midfield. And uh, now you see what is basically a front 5 of Luis Diaz on the wing. Then you have Jota and Nunez in the 2, and then you have Salah, and then you also have Elliott. Elliott has since come on, and I guess he's playing as a wing back. Uh, and so I mean, there's just so many players to highlight, and then you also one thing a couple I haven't mentioned is the job and work rate that Curtis Jones and Szoboszlai did before they were taken off. Curtis Jones is another player that has to go off, as well. And again, I'm going to pause it. Right, and so we get to the Jota goal, and right before this, like I said, Liverpool are able to kind of move the ball pretty quickly, and I think it might be Joe Gomez for both passes, but Jota basically makes a very clever run. Maybe it's Luis Diaz that is able to thread a ball that's able to find him, and it looks like he's going to be completely through on goal, and it's Carlos Cuenca that comes out of nowhere and does a very good job to anticipate this, and basically is able to clear the danger away, but I'm wondering now after on because I didn't watch it, I didn't notice it, in real time, but on rewatch, one thing that, I'm trying to think now is maybe Jota tried to put this in a little bit on his back pocket, that he recognized that, this guy just came, closing in on me just on a sprint, and if I can just get a little cutback where he can go around me, I might be able to get around him. And I think that's basically what happened. So we get to the goal. Liverpool again are able to pass it side to side because there's no any kind of ball pressure at all near them, and they get to a point where again you have Rodrigo Munoz and you have Emil Smith Rowe, and Joe Gomez is able to get on the ball as part of that back three, and he's able to again thread a ball into into I guess it's Darwin Nunes, yeah, into Darwin Nunes posting up. Darwin Nunes does a really good job then to turn around, and then he plays that ball into Diego Jota, and Jota again, white as Cuenca is coming across him, he basically does a cutback. And it's clever thinking by Jota, and then he basically puts the keeper to go the other way. And at that point, you thought Liverpool may actually, win the game. It took a part where Liverpool have like 3 or 4 chances at the end where Virgil van Dijk almost has a shot 5 yards from goal, and that's blocked at the end either by Cuenca or Diop, and that's a massive block that maybe saves the game. Might have even been Anthony Robinson, to be honest, but that is how we got here, and Liverpool have 16 shots. Liverpool outshot Fulham 16 shots, only 4 on target, Fulham with 12. Liverpool was 61% possession and 3 big chances, and this is unreal because, they were unreal for, like, after, the first 8 minutes or so. This is dude playing down a man, and it's just the only time I've seen a team dominate this way. Now they don't win, so and it's not all, glory, but it was also versus Fulham, funny enough, but it was Man City when, a couple years back when I think it was Julian Alvarez got sent off, and Man City basically I think they already had their goals, so it was they didn't necessarily have to score, but they were able to just keep the ball, down a man, where it was just a masterclass in that respect. This was a little bit different. Liverpool were able to still press, Fulham to go long, Fulham to Bird Leno wasn't dealing with the pressure, and anytime, the ball goes long, Liverpool were able to, they seemed like they had the extra man in midfield to win, those second balls, those second duels. So you're able to press Fulham into mistakes, able to relatively defend the transitions. Now it wasn't all good, because they do concede. Could have been a little bit better by both Trent, by Joe Gomez, by Kwanzaa, who had just come on, and it is what it is. But I think by Van Dijk as well. To be honest, on the we watch, but uh, dropping points isn't necessarily great, and it was only a couple of days ago after Man City where they had like a 9 point gap, and now it's just two, and Chelsea is starting to really look like they're in a groove. But for the most part, there are some things to be quite positive about, especially Diego Jota. Diego Jota is back, but also this is a game that I think you can, like, put in your back pocket. This was kind of the first time where, Arne Slot had kind of announced himself a little bit to the league, and it's one thing to come in and do what he's done with Jurgen Klopp players, essentially. Now he has, made some tweaks to how they've been playing, so, there is some of that, but this is a kind of game I don't think Klopp would have done this, to move Ryan Gravenberch into into defense, the way he rotated people over, the way he basically ended up going with like a 3-1-5 to in the game to be Fulham are playing in a back four. And because Liverpool are using basically a front five, you're almost pinning them in, and Fulham aren't even able counter after that. The final 8 or so minutes in the game, Fulham were pinned, and they could not get out of it. They're up a man. It was very very wild. Liverpool were able to kind of do something like they were able to win the game when Newcastle when Virgil van Dijk was sent off a year ago. But that was a game when Newcastle had 19 shots. Alisson Becker had to make 8 or so Herculean saves, and then Nunez basically got two very late on the counter. It wasn't like this. I This is something that the one Anfield has also kind of announced itself as well. People have been making jokes about it being a library. The atmosphere is back. I think the belief is back. And looking at some of the players, Diego Jota is back, and we'll see. He was able to get some minutes in the legs versus Southampton as well. And this is one of the attackers. I don't think a lot of people in this position actually do this. And the other thing that's kind of funny about this is Darwin Núñez seems to work better with Diego Jota. It was very interesting to see. It wasn't just you know when Klopp was taking Gakpo off, when Klopp was trying to bring on Darwin Núñez and Jota. You just didn't know how this was necessarily going to work, and he keeps Luis Diaz, and he basically moves him from being a false nine to kind of keeping on the wing side. Maybe you could have possibly done, maybe the one thing you could have done is maybe kept Gakpo on and maybe taken Luis Diaz off because Luis Diaz did have a chance at the end to win it as well. But I don't necessarily need to go at him. Everyone deserves, the plaudits for the number of distance that they all covered. I mean, the work rate that Szoboszlai and Jones did, it almost felt like they were playing with three men, just the kind of ground that they were able to recover, but also just the composure on the ball. They're so brave. You're able to press Fulham and to go in long, and Fulham weren't able to do that in with an additional man. And again, it was just it was maybe Fulham being a little unnerved a little bit with the atmosphere and what they were up against. It was wild to see. But again, Fulham were also deserving of a point. But a couple players to talk about. Ryan Gravenberch. This is a player that was on the outside, kind of looking in just a year ago. He had some flashes, in Klopp's side, but it never really seemed like he had a set place position. Not only has he locked down the number 6 kind of holding, DM, CM kind of role in this squad, it, it almost seems like he might be the preferred center back if Kanate can't go just because of how good he was. Mostly because the guy that otherwise would have been Joe Gomez. I think he works better as a left back. And I think that was another thing too. The control that Liverpool had in that second half, I thought it was a little bit better than we had seen in a few weeks. Because I think Andy Robinson, when the ball kind of gets to him, the movement kind of stops. He's too late to kind of to make up his mind. And Joe Gomez was just smoother with the ball at his feet. Now doesn't always have the left foot, so you're not going to get those bombing runs. So you're not going to necessarily get that, but it's maybe makes you a little bit more defensively secure. Who knows? Um, and just again, so yeah, Gravenberch to highlight the work rate of Szoboszlai and Jones. Already talked about them, and then I think with Dorian Nunes, it's funny when he comes in. Slot isn't just asking Darwin Núñez to just kind of basically do a hero act all by himself. He's allowing basically Nunez to play with Jota, and I feel like the few times that we've seen Nunez play his best, there was a game with West Ham where I think it was also a cup game where that to me was maybe the best the attack looked. It was like basically Cody Gakpo as the quote unquote left wing, and then it was Jota as the either second striker or number 10, and then it was Darwin Núñez, and basically there was a really good chemistry, but between those three, and we need to see how fit Jota is if he's able to be reliable or not. If Jota can be back and he can go in this purple patch like he always is, I think I always talked about him being the second best finisher outside of Salah. I'm going to be a little bit more bearish on Liverpool, but we'll have to see. I am concerned about the injuries. I am a little bit concerned going into Spurs. All of a sudden, they found form themselves. So they also looked a bit of a mess the way that they ended the game, but they were very good before the first 60-ish minutes first Man United today. Uh, they destroyed Southampton, and Liverpool went there a couple of weeks ago, and they struggled in the league, and they somewhat struggled a little bit yesterday, but it wasn't the EU23 side. But some negatives. Luis Diaz is there's a lot that he seems to leave on the plate. I think is probably the best way to put it. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Lot of great work rate, and the fact that he was doing this kind of false nine stuff in the first half, it helped Liverpool actually retake possession. So don't necessarily have to go at him that much. Trent Alexander-Arnold, maybe he's just coming back from injury, but this wasn't necessarily the best showing. The fact that he was just constantly bullied, basically, he was targeted. Yeah, I mean, you could really see it. Now he is dealing with two people basically running at him, but it's not necessarily the best look when you just see it's either Robinson or it's Arobi. They're just jogging past Trent, and then once you allow the person to jog past you, then they go into the sprint. Now you're already behind the eight ball, and it hurts. It hurts that he didn't track his run, and that hurt in the goal that was conceded. And then with Andy Robinson, you have the PK versus Southampton, the PK given away versus Madrid, and it just feels like he's a square peg in a round hole. And he's lost a step defensively as well, and it just feels like it maybe is time to think about maybe giving someone else at least the starter spot, and you can still play him. But there's just kind of, and again, it could be maybe at a blip. Maybe he can find a way to redeem himself. I don't really know. We'll see what's in store versus Ange and Spurs. It's not going to be an easy game, coming up. And then Liverpool better get used to playing Spurs because apparently that's who they drew for the semifinal in the Carabao Cup game. So we'll have to see about that. With Fulham, again, Fulham were deserving of getting something. And again, Fulham's Anthony Robinson is quite good, but I do feel like they were making a mistake by laying off and allowing Liverpool to control there. But Robinson and Arobi very 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 good. In the first half, Harry Wilson was able to get in behind. Maybe a little fortunate. Pereira wasn't sent off. And who knows? It's very weird. I don't know how this game would have been like if it had stayed 11-11. Liverpool going down to 10 men kind of changed a little bit how it made it awkward for Fulham because I think they were setting up to defend without the ball and then go for the counter. And with the 10 men, it made it kind of awkward to do that. And I feel like Marco Silva got a little too cute, but at the end of the day, a point is a point and is a good point for Fulham. And then to Arsenal and Everton, there's not a ton to talk about as far as the actual game, so I don't have to do that much of a rundown. It's a Sunday special, I guess you can say, but I do think Arteta overthought things again, and if Arsenal off that Fulham result. Did have a decent performance versus Monaco. Jesus started, didn't score, but I thought they actually looked pretty good with him. He set up Saka for one of those goals. Arsenal played well enough to be multiple goals ahead. It was only 1-0 though, and then there was a misplayed pass that Saka was able to score on the empty net, and that then I think Hazard tacked on a third late. Uh, Monaco though was doing something a little interesting on the corner kicks. They were leaving three or four people up ahead, so there were few people in the box, and it was allowing the goalkeeper to actually come out and contest some of those balls. It wasn't nearly as crowded. So interesting kind of tactic there. And then we saw Lewis Skelly also start at left back because that was something that we didn't see on for versus Fulham. And then Everton did not play last week, and they almost had some energy now that because of that. And I feel like they were able to eke this out because of that. But you look at this, and this was for a neutral fan, this wasn't really great because Everton went into this not really caring on having the ball. Not really caring on even scoring a goal, just basically getting out with a 0-0. It almost felt like that was the game plan, and lo and behold, they got it. But we did get look at the starting 11, and you start to see some of the issues that Arsenal have. So you have Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly. That's basically you're playing Lewis Skelly inverted. So he's another person in midfield basically. You have Declan Rice as like the sixth, the person that's kind of deepest, but he's not really the best passer, and he's basically a center back playing there. And you already have Saliba and Gabriel, and now you have Rice as well. Now, if you were playing Messi, I understand it, but you're playing against Calvert-Lewin, so it was a little bit overkill, but it is what it is. And then you have Saka, Odegaard, Moreno, and then basically you have Martinelli, and you have Saka, Martinelli, and Havertz. So you can kind of see a little bit where this can maybe be a little awkward. You know, Marino is being forced into this quote unquote Granit Xhaka role, and the only thing you're kind of noticing as you get more glimpses of him, he doesn't really have the best pace to him. He's very good with ball speed. You can't say that he's technically good, but he doesn't really have the pace. He doesn't. He's not really doing the overlap runs, and I feel like they are missing. They're missing that still. And I feel like the person that is really missing that is Martinelli. And then we get to Everton. Not a ton of news as far as the lineup goes. They didn't have uh, Dwight McNeil, but you look at this and it's Ashley Young, like 39-year-old, and it's versus Martinelli. And you just thought that's not advantage to Everton at all. They did have Tarkowski and Braithwaite back. That's been a big problem for Everton. And you know this whole season they haven't been able to field those two for a lot of the games. And the games that they did last season, Everton were apparently top four in the league as far as XG conceded. Mangala and Gaye, and that is just kind of steel in front of the back line. So you have basically a front uh, you know, the way that this was lined up, it was basically a 4-5 and then one, which was Calvert-Lewin. Calvert-Lewin was just by himself for most of this game. He wasn't even like doing token pressure. He was sometimes just standing still. His job was to conserve energy, and whenever Arsenal went into this block and there was kind of a turnover, Calvert-Lewin's job was to contest any kind of loose ball, any kind of be a an outlet for anything over the top. So you make runs for that, have energy for that, but also to contest anything in the air where you've got two people maybe on your back, but you're able to bring the ball down and hold the ball up. That was basically what his role was, and weirdly enough, they get the best chance maybe in the entire game, and it comes when the ball's kind of on the touchline or sideline. I think Saliba goes to ground and Mace, maybe gets injured or something, and Calvert-Lewin gets on the ball, and he does. He's able to hold it up, and then he's able to play in Decore making a run, and so there's no Saliba in the picture, and Decore, almost has a chance in on goal, and then out of nowhere, Gabriel is able to come back and have a big slide, and that was the other news coming in. Arsenal has been without Gabriel for a couple of games. They didn't have him versus Fulham, and I thought that ended up actually showing up here. It's only a 0-0 game, but without Gabriel, maybe Decore doesn't have, someone able to close down on him, and maybe he's able to get a better shot off. So having Gabriel, back, worked for them. But we get to so I mentioned the Everton chance, and then Arsenal do get a couple chances. There's Lewis Skelly that starts to get a little bit more involved. He's able to find Odegaard kind of in the box. Shot dragged wide. There's Martinelli having a cross to Odegaard. He probably could do a little bit better here. It's not the easiest shot, but we're starting to see Odegaard to get a little bit more involved. We're seeing Martinelli played by Havertz. It's a tight angle, but he can't really beat the goalkeeper, but also he doesn't really have anything else. When Martinelli gets the ball, he can only go for goal or he can try to recycle. There's no one kind of near him. So that Arsenal's never really you're playing against a team that is defending so deep. You're never committing numbers forward. And I felt that was a big problem. So I just feel like as the game went on, Arteta was overthinking things and making errors. So he takes off Odegaard in the second half. He moves Timber to left back when Timber doesn't really have a left foot, and he brings on Thomas Partey to play right back, and he also brings on Jorginho. So he takes off Declan Rice in here as well. He also brings on Jesus and Trossard on. That actually wasn't too bad. Trossard did make a difference. There were a couple of pretty nice crosses that Trossard was able to whip in that did cause some danger, but and then towards the very end, there was that moment when it looked like Mikolenko did go to ground and did actually catch Thomas Partey. Possibly got away with not giving a PK, but Arsenal were not good. Uh, you know, 1 point something XG, 13 shots, 5 on target. Yes, they have 78% possession. Everton just nothing. Everton had 2 shots and nothing on target. But the thing that was striking to me is like it's the 65th to 68th minute, and this is happening over and over again, where Arsenal have like 5 players in the back just passing it side by side with Rice and the center backs and maybe a fullback. and it's near the halfway line. There's no one really near him. You're not really pushing people forward, and I just think it, it's very awkward because I still think that Arsenal are a bigger threat than Chelsea. But my word, Arteta or some of these players need to snap out of it. I do think it's Arteta. No fullback support. Timber is leaving Saka stranded. I think I was thinking Timber is better than Ben White because Timber will actually help out Saka on an overlap run. Give him something to run with, and he's not. And I don't know if the idea is to allow Saka to take his man 1v1, but in a back five or in this 5-4-1 thing, Saka had two people on him or even three people on him. Sometimes he was even able to get through two or three people, and then out of nowhere, Tarkowski, shows up uh, or Braithwaite. It's and asking Saka to do all that by himself is just wrong. So you're not giving him any kind of support. I think, and I thought Lewis Skelly being played was going to be an idea to get him more out wide to help Martinelli out. And instead, you played him in midfield. So it's just I'm starting to see a pattern here. Teams that are abandoning fullbacks playing wide, City have done this too. I think it's backfiring. And one team that's not doing this, and it surprised me because I thought, coming in he was going to do this, is Enzo Maresca. He's not followed suit. He's actually done the opposite with Mark Cucurella. And yeah, again, I mentioned how he's helped out Jadon Sancho. When Marlo Gusto sometimes is played through middle, some quote unquote inverted, but they also allow him to get wide too. We're not seeing that with Arteta and the fullbacks. Now I know they're missing Calafiori, they are missing Ben White. I don't necessarily know how much different that would be. I do think with Calafiori it maybe would be a little different. Ben White was good for them last season, but it hasn't even before he got hurt. Also weren't necessarily, that right side has been a little off it. Sometimes you ask Odegaard to make those runs outside, and I just feel like that's not the best way to do Odegaard. The other thing I was thinking about is this is a team that is just not at all, after like the 68th minute mark, they're not even trying to go, forward with the ball. They're just booting it to boot its sake. They don't want to leave their area. Why not bring on a second attacker or a second kind of creative player? You take off Odegaard for Ethan Wyneri, the 17-year-old. Why not play both of them at this point? A little bit. It's taking a gamble, but you're at home as well. I just thought you needed to probably do a little bit more. I think Thierry Henry called it out pretty good. It was he saw Liverpool trying to win the game down a man, and Arsenal were trying to just play, not to lose. I don't want to necessarily say that because they were, the entire they were in Everton's area the entire game, but I just thought that was a little bit surprising. The lack of runners in the box, to me, that the crossing is predictable. It's just hoof something in. Maybe Havertz can help out. Uh, maybe you get the ball out wide, but it's always just sending something in. There's no cutback cross. You're not getting to the byline nearly as much. You're not i- i- it's not you're not doing early crosses. You're not moving the ball at all. A lot of this is just really slow. You're not seeing this direct balls over the top. It's just again the risk averse ofness of Arsenal all of a sudden, and it's not just happened. You know, it's not just happened instantly. It's taken a while for them to get here. It's a problem, and uh, I think Arteta needs to get them to play the way that they were, a couple of years ago. This is going to be a league where if you get draws, I think you're going to lose the league. Who cares if you get beat? You're going to need to win games. I think that the side that tries to eke out as many draws and to save just a point or two, I think they're going to be the ones that end up actually dropping the most points when it matters. So this is a situation where this does hurt you. Now it hurts Liverpool too to not win that game versus Fulham. Um, so the other kind of thought I've had is, Saka's your best player, and you need to find a way to get him the ball where he's not, getting it on the wing. I see Saka. I see a lot of Salah. At least from last season where he's getting the ball and he's being asked to beat two or three players before he can get touches inside the goal line or inside the penalty area. You need to find a way to get him close to the goal. You need to find a way to allow him and Martinelli to get the ball from the sideline or whatnot, and actually, yeah, allow them to carry it into the penalty box. Sometimes it feels like they're too worried about to of doing that because again, if you carry and leave your position and you lose the ball, then you can possibly get counted on. But Arsenal have a lot of ways to stop counterattacks when you've got those, you've got Saliba, you've got Gabriel playing, you also have Rice playing, and then you bring on Thomas Partey as well. It's just it's overkill. To me. Um, and Odegaard was your chief creator. He was lively in the first half, kind of disappeared in the second half. And the last one is Kai Havertz versus low blocks. It's it's just I was wondering, does it work better? Does it make more sense to actually play Gabriel Jesus in more of these games? Now, Kai Havertz offers you a little bit more in the air, but and I think you actually saw that a little bit versus Crystal Palace yesterday. Jesus still has something in him. So also Rice versus low blocks, just Rice or mid blocks. Just I don't understand what he offers in games when you don't really need someone to stop transitions. There's not going to be really a transition a goal, given up in here unless there's a defensive mistake. But and again, it kind of goes back to what I'm saying here. I can't help but compare this performance with Everton versus what Chelsea just did with Brentford. They also went up against a settled back five, and Chelsea had like 16 shots in the first 20 minutes where they had the fullbacks high up upfield. They're either making overlapping or underlapping runs. They have their center backs high upfield, like Colwell, being very dangerous, ripping scary balls into the box. I have a note here, and kind of tongue in cheek, but would it kill Saliba to learn how to chip a 30-yard ball into the box, or Gabriel, for that matter? You can't just be known for your defensive qualities. You've got to learn how to play a little bit. But the other thing that Chelsea have is they have Nicholas Jackson, who is always a target man in the box. He's always someone that actually puts some fear into center backs, and that's always going to leave things open for others. No one really fears Kai Havertz, and I feel like it's not really his fault. He's not really a striker. He's being forced to kind of play this way, and I think it's because Kai Havertz does a lot of really good stuff out of possession, helps them win duels, helps them win aerials and whatnot. But uh, that is kind of you need to try to find a way to fix this. Whether or not it's Victor Osimhen in January. I did a mock lineup with Rashford, Jesus, and Saka. That feels like a very formidable, kind of front three. If they went that way, and you have Marino or Odegaard, and then maybe Calafiore and Rice is kind of a box four, and then you have Gabriel Saliba and Timber. That to me would be fairly strong. But I'm just kind of playing around a little bit. But that is with Rashford. That is, but are you going to take on that kind of wage bill? And if you did bring him in, would that upset kind of the chemistry in the squad as well? That's one thing that Arteta has been really big on. But that is where we are with this and with Everton. The only thing to say about this is good job, but gross football, and you try to play this way for a full season, you'll get relegated. And I'm trying to people have been trying to praise Everton so far, and I understand that they are limited, financially, and understand. You look at their squad; it really is rough. They went in this game without Dwight McNeil, one of their creative players as well. So they were maybe a little bit unmanned, but you can't just eke out draws. It's not going to be enough. You're going to have to win games. So this 4-5-1 setup is now again, it is away at Arsenal. Maybe just throw it up, and it's like if you get a point, that's kind of a bonus. You're not going to play like this way at at your own ground. You would hope, but that is just kind of at hope. But it is what it is, and he comes into this with a plan, and he is able to get away with it. And then we'll finally end with Chelsea and Brentford with Mark Cucurella getting that goal right before halftime, and then Nicholas Jackson making it 2-0 after Brentford somewhat, got a little bit back into it after being, really, really played out of it in the first half. And then Ryan Mbeumo did make it 2-1, where a bit of a mistake he was able to get behind, where he then was able to beat Sanchez on the breakaway, and there were a lot of extras happened a little bit towards the end. Mark Cucurella actually got himself sent off for a second yellow. And, yeah, I mentioned how, one of the plays of the game happened, second half where Sanchez made an unbelievable save on, I think it's Christian Norgard had a bit of a volley, and then there was also Fabio Carvalho that had a chance to almost almost scored even before the Imbrimo chance where the ball was crossed in, and all he had to do was just get a touch that would basically clear the crossbar, and instead he banked it right on it from close range. So not the best present from Liverpool to Liverpool from their former player in Fabio Carvalho. Uh, but the interesting thing is just the way this game starts. It's Brentford supposed to be like they haven't been great, away from home, but Brentford are lining up in this deep deep block, 5. This is you think it's gonna be hard, and, out of nowhere, Jackson gets 2 really early chances. There's a great, cross by Madueke, and that'll be the name that I say later on. It's a great header, and that just barely misses, and then there's a ball that Enzo plays Ludwig Colwell plays, over the top. Jackson's always a willing runner, and hits the ball on the volley. It's a great hit, and it's pretty great save. Chelsea have something like 21 crosses, and again, loads. I don't really know what the number of shots was, but it was a lot of shots. They're just pepper and flecking, and it does get to the 40th minute before we finally get the goal, but they do get the reward, and it is Mark Cucurella, and is a guy that, for one, is offering Jadon Sancho support all game, and then he makes it a timely run into the box, kind of a narrow run, and gets on the end of a very great ball delivered by Matareke, who seems to have that cross nailed down. He's starting to apply some lovely service into the box, and he's also a pretty good winger as far as take on someone. He's very good. He can get by his man. He can go both with his left foot and right foot, which makes him dangerous as well. And just sometimes it does feel like he's maybe a little bit greedy, and maybe he does try to do too much by himself. But he's crazy young. There's a lot of talent in this kid, and it just feels like he's only starting to get better as well. Like I said, second half Brentford did wake up, did give it a go, but it was really all she wrote. This was impressive to say the least. 26 shots, 8 on target. Brentford with 9, and I think 4. The XG was about 1.6 to 2.3. Chelsea with loads of possession, and then 443 passes, 86%. You would have expected maybe a little bit higher. But Brentford did wake up a little bit in the second half to try to press him a little bit. I do think you can press Sanchez to go long. I think I already talked about that before, but I am speeding up a little bit because I do want to get to the end with Chelsea, because I want to kind of double down on this kind of take, because I'm at a spot where I feel like Chelsea is close, but maybe just not there yet. Maybe next season, and hopefully, maybe a little hopium on my end. Uh, but I do think that 70 minutes of this game frightened me. And they still have some people missing. They have, Reece James. No one's talking about Reece James, and you've got Malo Gusto doing what he's doing. You got João Felix, and no Pedro Neto this game. No Wesley Fofana. You're playing this game is their fourth center back, I think, in Tosin. And Tosin Adebayo is a pretty good center back. At least he was quite good for Fulham last season. You got no Batashile as well, and you've got Tosin and Levy Colwell in a two, and the way that they that their shape is changing, but the one thing they were really able to do is they were able to get a lot of you're able to find a way to kind of piece where you can have Cole Palmer and Enzo both really high up. Palmer has a free role, and uh, they're not being harmed by this defensively, at least yet. We'll have to see about that. They for being as young as a squad they are, they're quite good at working without the ball as well. It's not really like they're ever really disorganized. Enzo Maresca has come in, and he's run some people over. Uh, and I'm someone that was maybe a little bit less inviting, I guess I could say, because I thought they should have kept on to Pochettino. That worked out for us. But yeah, he's making me eat my words a little bit. Uh, but then again, that said, Chelsea, as good as they were, and they were very good. Over 90 minutes, you go with the Sanchez saves and the Fabio Cavallo and Norgard saves, and you can play that kind of game where it could have actually ended with a 1-1 kind of game. And so I do think they were short. They're short an elite center back, in my opinion. I look at the difference right now, and I see Van Dijk and Kanate. If Kanate can go, and I see Allison versus Robert Sanchez. And I just feel like over the full season, I do think that favors Liverpool. If it is just those two, I do think Arsenal will be there too. Ending on with kind of some positives to end on. Enzo Fernandez is a completely different player, and he has the assist to play in Nicholas Jackson for that second goal. It's a great finish, to be honest, by Nicholas Jackson. He still has to beat the keeper on that 1v1 chance, and he takes it early, and he's showing a lot of confidence with that strike. And this is a guy that I've always kind of assumed would be kind of, their Darwin Nunes. He's really, showing up, and he's really uh, one of the probably the one of the biggest, surprises, or as far as growth from one season to the other, is him. He does look pretty good. And the only thing you can maybe go at him a little bit for is he probably should have had 2 goals, because he had one where, there was another back cross where Zimbabwe could have done a little bit better on the volley. Otherwise, because I think he, like, mishit it. Otherwise, I mean, what a threat he's starting to be. Jaden Sancho again starting to come good for them. Moses Caicedo, that's another thing too. Chelsea have went out and spent 100 some million for Enzo. I think 120, making him the most expensive player. And then they made spent 120 ish or 110 million for Moses Caicedo. I mean, they've spent you know, that much for at least these 2 people. So it's important for them to come good, but they really are starting to actually really show out. And if Chelsea do end up, getting some silverware in the near future, them beating, eating the bullet, and shelling out for Moses Caicedo, when it felt like when he was on Brighton, he was the most obvious number 6, CM, kind of player to bring in to target. Uh, that I can really imagine, and he really is starting to feel himself a little bit. Just always good in the duels, but he's just very good on the ball, as well. And he's gotten some time where sometimes he's played with Roman Lavia or not. This time he's kind of by himself. They allowed Cole Palmer and Enzo to play a little advanced. So that's kind of a storyline too, as well as Mark Cucurella and Gusto. Now Cucurella isn't always the best defensively, and I don't really think he's known for really being that great, going forward. But he's got quite the good chemistry, quite a good connection with Jaden Sancho. And yes, I do remember what happened, last week versus Spurs, where he was, the butt end of all the jokes. But the timing of his runs are really good, and I just think it's not necessarily him. I think he's being coached very well. So but it's unlucky for them because he's going to miss their next game, for them. And then with Brentford, to just kind of end with, I feel like the only negative here is he went, Frank kind of changed up the lineup a little bit. He was a little nerved on Chelsea's wings. He didn't really feel like maybe Vandenberg as a fullback or Lewis Potter as a fullback. So he wanted to bring on a second or third center back. And the only thing you can say here is everyone really belonged, with Chelsea, in my opinion, except maybe 2 players. Mads Razorlov, or Rora as Royslov. I can't say names. And it's not really to go in him, but just to feel like anytime Chelsea got near him, he was freaking. And then unfortunately, Ethan Pinnock. And he can still do a job in the penalty area, but you get him out open in space, and Nicholas Jackson just basically burned him for pace. Now Nicholas Jackson can do that with a lot of people. He Nicholas Jackson scored versus Liverpool, but that one kind of let the it was a bitter taste, I guess, you can say. So that is where we are. And then Frank asked his team to kind of sit back. It felt like, and then he gave things a go in the second half, and they did give things a go. So that is where we are. It's been kind of hard to get this in. Thank you for tuning in, and until then, you stay squatting and stop recording.